name is Miguel Myers. Welcome to my horror confessional, where every week I'll have a guest come on and talk about one classic horror movie that they haven't seen and why. We'll discuss the movie, the actors, and probably get off topic quite a bit. Once I believe they have properly atoned, I will absolve them of their horror movie sin. Today we have Celso Hurtado. He was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. He has been a punk guitarist, worked in the political arena, and has played entirely too many hours of The Legend of Zelda. In his writing, he strives to surprise his readers and make them think twice before investigating that creak in the hallway. The Ghost Tracks is his first novel. Celso, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So let's dig right away into your book, The Ghost Tracks. I just finished it yesterday or the day before, and I was absolutely in love. Like for this to be your first novel, like it doesn't read like that whatsoever. So I wanted to congratulate you on an amazing first novel.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it was, it took a long time to write it. And while I was writing it, to your point, I was like learning how to write. So it took me a long time, many years. It actually started off as a completely different story. And while I was, working on it, I was reading books on how to write and all that. So by the very end of the process, I felt more comfortable with what I was doing. And so it came out, with I'm pretty proud of it, the way it actually ended up. But you'd laugh if you kind of knew what the original story was about. It didn't even bear any resemblance to what it ended up being. But that learning process was just invaluable.
Well, I mean, I would absolutely love to. I mean, if you're willing to share, what was the original story and how did it change to what it turned out to be?
Sure. So my original concept was kind of like a weaponized haunting, so that somebody would, let's say, leave a body in somebody's house trying to haunt them, basically, right?
Hmm.
As a
Okay.
as a means of revenge, let's say. And so this person finds this body in their house, or like, what's going on here? And I thought, well, maybe they would try to get someone to help them. So maybe some kind of paranormal investigator. So they go find somebody. And eventually I started to think, well, this paranormal investigator is way more interesting than the rest of the story. Why don't I write a book about this person? And that's kind of how the Ghost Tracks ended up being the way it was. So just completely different story. Um, I mean, as far as like how this new story came up, it was a combination of events. As you know, the Ghost Tracks is San Antonio's like biggest urban legend. Everybody here loves the Ghost Tracks. And I had gone down there once when I was a teenager, and there was a wreck at the Ghost Tracks when I was there, and it was terrifying. This truck came in and missed the turn and crashed, and it was a really ugly scene. And so it stayed with me forever. And I'm like, man, I wonder if I could work in some kind of an accident at the Ghost Tracks. And that's kind of a part of the story. It's kind of weird how things unfolded. And then, as far as the character, I was like, well, I'd like to have an interesting backstory. And, you always see all these stories in the news about, um, you know, children addicted to drugs and what becomes of them later on. I was like, what happens to these children? I'm sure they end up having feelings about the way they were raised and what happened to them. And like these two completely unrelated ideas, I kind of try to put them together along with some other, weird things in my subconscious, I guess.
Okay. And so do you want so I am originally from Chicago. I've just been in Austin for 7 years or so, and I had never heard of the legend of the Ghost Tracks. In fact,
Mm,
the first time I heard about it was when you and I met at the Ghoulish Book Festival earlier this year, and you were kind of telling me about it, and I was kind of really fascinated by it. And then you kind of explained the story of your book, and I had to pick it up, so I got an actual physical copy there. But for my listeners who may not be, because I've heard of some urban legends that are kind of like all around the United States, but I don't know if this, and maybe it is, maybe I'm just not really in tune with like urban legends, because admittedly I don't really read a lot of them. But could you explain to my listeners what the Ghost Tracks is, and then also what your book is about?
sure. So I'll just tell you though, real quick, there is a town in Illinois that has the exact same urban legend as this Ghost Tracks, right? Which I found out. There's a website asked me to do a guest essay for them, And so I did it about urban legends. And while I was researching some, I came across this fact. So we're not the only ones in San Antonio.
Okay.
But the way the legend goes is that, like back in the 50s, in this on the south side of town, there's a stretch of tracks where a school bus full of children stalled on the tracks. Train came and hit the bus and killed all the children in the bus. So nowadays, if you go to this stretch and before you get to the tracks, you put your car into neutral, your car will move forward over the tracks until your car is safe. And the legend goes that it's the spirits of these children who died who are trying to prevent others from dying on these railroad tracks. So once you get past the tracks, once they push you to safety, if you get out and sprinkle baby powder on the back of your car, you'll see little tiny handprints all on the back. And if you drive around, you'll see that the street names are named after these children that died in the area. So, Miguel, as you know, I talk in the book about whether this is true or not. That's part of the mystery of the book. But that is the way the story is told.
Right. And so your book follows character shoot, Erasmo Cruz, sorry. And I got to tell you, I am not from San Antonio, but I felt like this book was like steeped in like all things San Antonio. And I've read books that are like about Chicago or something like that, and a lot of times they make it more about the place than the actual story.
Mm.
Whereas your book, you kind of infused San Antonio into the story, but didn't make it. It's a book about San Antonio, but it never overwhelms the story, and I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I definitely didn't want it to read like a research paper on San Antonio because I know what
Right.
you're talking about. Sometimes it's too much, right?
Mm.
So the basic story is that, his grandmother gets sick, and so he needs money to help pay for her treatment. So he is obsessed with the supernatural, with the paranormal. He knows a lot about it. So he decides to kind of open up this agency, see if he can help anybody for money, and he takes on these three completely different cases. And he gets to visit different parts of San Antonio. So it was perfect for what I was trying to do: talk about San Antonio, talk about these cases. And so by the end of the book, yeah, he kind of goes on these different adventures to try to figure out what the hell's going on. And I tried to be purposeful in where I was picking him going to. Like the aqueduct, I thought that was a cool place. I actually took an afternoon to go traipse down there and go underneath the little bridges and look around where something like this would happen. So it was a lot of fun. I feel like there's not enough books and movies set in San Antonio, barely any. So I felt it was my duty as a San Antonian to, try to correct that.
Yeah, and for me, like I was trying to think of like the atmosphere that you were building with it, or what it feels like, and it felt to me like, have you seen the HBO show Los Spookies?
So that's been on my radar for a long time. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, when I saw like what it was about, this was before the Ghost Tracks came out. I got a little like, oh my God, that sounds a little similar, too similar for my taste. But it was fine. But I do want to see it. Is it kind of along those lines or?
So I was gonna say it's like Los Spookies mixed with like X Files or like Ghostbusters sort of thing. In no way are they completely similar, but like they're in the same ballpark.
Got you, got you.
And but it's a wonderful, like it would be make a wonderful accompaniment to your book,
Mm.
you know.
Oh, awesome, awesome.
But yeah, that's what I got that feeling, and I love Los Spookies. Like I was in it. I just stumbled on it within the last couple months or whatever, and they're coming up with a season two, which I'm really excited for. But yeah, that's just the sense I got while reading your book. So your main character Erasmus, he was a for to me a very interesting character because he's our main character, but he's not the typical hero that
Mm.
you see in stories, right? In books, he's not the one who's running into the fight. He's actually running away from a lot of the fights throughout the book. In fact, his grandmother, who's struck with cancer and is going through treatment, actually comes to him towards the end of the book and is like, "You got to stop running, dude. Like you've been running
Mhm.
your whole life, you
Right,
know."
right.
And so, like, I found myself being really frustrated at Erasmo when, like, specifically when he's like in the fight with the gang members earlier on,
Mhm.
or just like when he uh, situations with like his maybe girlfriend. I'm forgetting her name off the top of my head right now.
Nora.
Nora, right? And we're in situations where like we have been trained that our main character is going to be stepping up and be the John Wayne character, that sort of thing. Like he doesn't do that. And while it was frustrating for me, it was refreshing. I was like, oh fuck, we're not. This isn't the typical novel that we're used to, you know. And I just love that thing about Erasmo. Um, and then he has his friend Rat, who is kind of like a well, it is his best friend, but it is almost like a kind of tortured soul. Like they both found each other, right? And you have this story that brings them together, but then also kind of tears them apart, and they come back toward at the end, and it's just like a really beautiful, touching friendship that they have that you don't see a lot of male characters having in books or even even in other media.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Like, to your first point about how Erasmo handles certain things, it's kind of funny because if when I step back and look at it, he's not necessarily great at what he does. He's wrong a lot of the times. I mean,
He's
more
also
often than not.
17. you
Yeah,
know
right. He's also 17. He's doing the best he can, but he's definitely, barking up the wrong tree a lot of times. And so I find that more interesting, obviously, than kind of someone who, like you said, kind of knows what they're doing all the time and all that. I mean, he's clearly a confused person, both in his personal life and with these cases he's being presented with, which appeals to me. And as far as Rat goes, yeah, I wanted him to have, a friend who is similar to him, but they have their own separate ideas of what's happening and what should be done and how to handle what life is throwing at them because they both had difficult circumstances growing up, but they're kind of dealing with it in slightly different ways. But I like the idea of two people who are kind of lonely finding what they need in each other, even if it's, yeah, like two male friends opening up to each other. And but part of it is they don't open up to each other enough. Rat never fully admits what happened with his home life, and you find out kind of why and what happened. And maybe had he shared some of that pain, he wouldn't have taken these steps that he is thinking of taking at the end of the book. But yeah, I thought those, you definitely, like, for me, what I wanted to have as far as like just entertaining everyone is having mystery. I love mystery in novels, but I did want to explore these characters and um, the trauma that they faced in life and how they're dealing with it and how they hope to move on. So kind of marrying those things was what I really was hoping to do.
and you succeeded. Um, so kind of the basic premise here is, and we'll put a spoiler here in case. I definitely recommend you read the book, but I'm going to put a spoiler here, and I'll put in the show notes when the spoiler ends. But essentially, what the story boils down to is that Erasmo and his friend Rat start like a ghost agency or just like a ghost detective agency. What would you say? Or I guess they just
Yeah, like a
open up.
paranormal investigation
Thank
agency
you.
kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A paranormal agency, and they put an ad in the paper, and right off the bat, they get like three responses, and those three responses take us pretty much throughout the whole of the book. Right? We got Nora, Billy. Is it Leander?
Leander, yeah.
Yeah, Leander. And they each have their own separate things, and I thought it was really cool because like one of them turns out to be sort of what we believe to be at the very beginning, or we're led to believe is like an exorcism type situation, and then we get a straight up like haunting or possession, no, not possession, poltergeist situation with Leander,
Mhm.
and then Billy is more like a precog, right?
Right, exactly. Mhm.
Yeah. And so like you found a way to merge like three different like subgenres of horror movies or horror literature into like one book, and it's all very cohesive. And I'm gushing about your book because I loved it. So I just want everybody to know that if you're still listening now, you should definitely be be reading this book. But yeah, the way the way you went about doing that, I just thought it was very impressive. And um, yeah, I know you said it took a while to write, but for a first novel is extremely impressive, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's kind of funny, how the creative process works because some of them are happy accidents and some of them is just you don't know any better. So since I hadn't written a novel before, I had no idea how much story I needed to fill up a book length work, right? And
Hmm.
so I originally had him like working on one case, but in my like, you know, inexperienced mind, I was like, well, that's not going to take up 300 pages. I better add another case. So then I added another case. And then again, I was like, I still don't think it's going to be enough. I better add another case. And so as it turned out, honestly, like one or two cases would have been enough because it ballooned up to way too big. But that was because I was inexperienced, right? And I ended up having to cut down a lot. So had I known what I know now, I mean, I definitely would not change the ghost track 'cause I'm thrilled with the way it came out. But had I known better, I wouldn't have added so much stuff because I was worried it would be kind of convoluted. But in the end, it all kind of came together, and so I'm happy with it. But like, I'm working on a follow up now to the Ghost Tracks. I mean, I haven't really. I mean, it's not official. I haven't really announced anything, and it's not definite, but fairly certain there's going to be another Ghost Tracks book. And
Okay.
so I'm working on that now, and I'm wrestling with this very topic. Like, how much am I? Because the first one, while it is there's a lot going on. I like that, but I had told myself if I did another one, I wouldn't cram it with so much stuff. Like to your point, there were like three different subgenres. Plus, Erasmo's own history at the Ghost Tracks for trying to figure out what
Right.
happened.
Oh, that, yeah, and his
Yeah,
background as
and his
well.
background and all that. And so I said, well, I'll make it easier next time. But I'm struggling because now part of me feels, man, this feels emptier because I'm used to so much going on in the Ghost Tracks. So I'm figuring that out now. So there's a balance there.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, I completely understand what you're saying here. And I know you have your creative process, but to me, I love the fact that whenever Erasmo kind of hit a wall on one story or one
Hmm.
case or whatever, he'd be able to turn around and go visit Nora, or
Yeah, yeah.
go home and talk to his grandmother who's going through the cancer, or go read his that book that
Oh,
I
yeah.
was like very surprised to find out he actually got from his dad. Right, that was one of his only possessions that he got from his
Right.
father. That was kind of a touching scene towards the end when I found that out,
Yeah.
because I have like the history. My history with horror is that the reason why I love it so much is because my oldest brother, who passed away, was a huge horror fan, and so he
Mm,
passed. He was 10 years older than me, my brother Ruben, and he passed that love of horror on to me. So when I was reading in your book that Erasmo got his love for all things spooky or paranormal from this book that his father left, I was like, wow, that's really touching, but we don't even. It could just be a book that he picked up, right? The father, like he doesn't know because he never met
well,
him. He didn't have.
so absolutely right. So like, you know, one thing, kind of like the bread and butter of the Ghost Tracks is, did these things happen? Are they real or are they not? Like, can this guy see the future or is he full of crap? Is he crazy? Is this kid really possessed or not? And along that same line, um, it's a very kind of similar thing. Um, did his dad, I mean, well, on an even more fundamental question, did his dad even leave him the book? Because what Erasmo basically says is he begged his grandparents for anything, and they said they didn't have anything, and he kept begging and begging, and finally they said, well, here. Did they just find something at a yard sale and just give it to him to shut him up? Or did was it really his dad's and they just, didn't want to give it to him? I mean, so those are, I mean, I kind of know the answer, but those are just kind of the questions I'd like for readers to consider. Exactly like you did. Like, did his dad just have it there and it just never even looked at it? I mean, maybe, so those are the kind of things I try to drop in here and there.
Maybe something we find out in part two. We don't know.
Perhaps, yeah.
We're talking about your book, and the other thing that I wanted to mention is, again, spoilers. This is for the very ending, which I thought was a surprise ending to me. Like, I can't. I'm not like the best person at seeing what's coming next, but this came out of nowhere. Was when Rat drove him to this house out in the suburbs, right? And they come to find out it's Rat's father's house, and he's moved on with his life, and he's rich, he has a business, and he wants nothing to do with Rat, which is absolutely devastating to find out. And then Rat decides that he wants to kill himself there to become a spirit and to haunt his father. Right? Is that
Yes,
correct?
it's kind of funny. That's the last vestige of the original idea I told you about earlier, that idea of a weaponized haunting. So in this case, he's going to do it there because, yes, he wants to kind of like stay in that house after he dies and kind of torture his father over time. That's his thought process. But, Erasmo is kind of telling him, I think you have different motives, I think you're just scared and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's the general idea.
Yeah, like he's scared and depressed, and he's
Yeah,
17 years old as well, and lived a very hard life. His mother kind of hates him as well,
right,
right?
right.
Like he's been bullied his whole life. Yeah, it's and I thought, man, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. I'm like, please don't let it happen. And yeah, Erasmo like launches at him and grabs him and forces him to stop. Which then they form this pact that they're gonna get. Oh man, I'm really excited. If you, I really hope that you can make part two happen because I'm really excited to see what happens.
Well,
When
Miguel, we'll talk about this offline, but I've made some decisions that you may not like so much about rap, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it afterwards.
Okay. All right, all right. Oh man, my heart. But yeah, so the book, it comes together so well. And I was just wondering what a lot of people, when I ask, like everybody reads like Stephen King as when they first started reading or whatever. But for you, what was your history with horror, like novels and like reading? Did you start off reading horror? Did you come to it through some other avenue?
Well, Miguel, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you the cliched answer because it was definitely Stephen King.
It's
Just,
for
I
me as
mean,
well.
just
I'm a
yeah,
cliche
I
as
know.
well.
So yeah, I mean that is what remember the most. Like Misery, I probably read it, I don't know, every summer growing up. I didn't have that many books around. We didn't have that much money, right? So like,
Right.
but I just I couldn't get enough of it, and then went on to it and The Stand and all that kind of stuff. But those are I didn't really ever read Goosebumps or any of that stuff when I was little. It was like Stephen King was like the first real horror stuff that I read. But a lot of it, I mean, I think most of the interest just came from more, I would say, movies early on. Like I remember, my mom would we'd watch that Elvira show where she would host and like movies
Hell
would come
yeah.
on.
Mistress of the Dark.
Yeah, so I vividly remember we'd stay up watching it, and then I'd be too scared to go to sleep, so I'd sleep, in their room on the floor and everything. Like that probably had more of an impact on my draw to horror than reading did, and the reading kind of came a little later, and I think, like a question that gets asked, and I'm sure you probably ask this too of your guests sometimes, is like why horror? I've been asked that quite a bit, like, why don't you write a mystery or whatever? Um,
I would never ask that question. I know because it's the only only good genre.
oh, the genre, yeah. Well, it's so funny, like just about mystery, real quick. In a lot of ways, like I almost feel like the Ghost Tracks is mainly a mystery with horror elements
Mhm.
sprinkled in. But
And
like,
some detective noir in there as
yeah,
well.
yeah, like that, like mystery really appeals to me. Like in really any genre, if it's a romance but has some mystery in it, sign me up, right? So it's important to me that whatever I produce has some mystery in it is kind of the hook, although it makes it incredibly like difficult to plot together. Like sometimes I wish I could just write a book about a monster chasing somebody and that's pretty much it. But
Mhm.
like having to have everything kind of come together like you talked about, it's there's a lot that goes into it. And like I said, I'm struggling with that actually now in the second book. But the reason like I wanted to have horror in it, I think it's because it pushes, really pushes your buttons. Everyone's trying to, I think, they like feeling something, whatever that is. And horror just lends itself to that. It lends itself to that feeling of anxiety or stress or shock and surprise or disgust. And, when you're looking just to feel something and here's this genre that touches all of these different emotions, it's quite a draw.
Yeah, and I was actually surprised at some of the parallels that we saw in the movie we're going to be talking about today, Don't Look Now, and your story. And I don't know if that was a happy coincidence or if you had read about it and that's why you wanted to do that, to do this movie. But yeah, I found myself feeling, hey, this is kind of like parallel to the Ghost Tracks, you know?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a funny story, Miguel. I don't know, like, I guess technically this is cheating, but I'll tell you something I just found out like last weekend at my we had a get together and I told my sister I was doing this podcast, right?
Mm.
And so I already told you like my mom showed me scary movies probably before I was ready for them. But I told her and she said, "Are you joking? Mom showed us that when we were little." I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah." So there's only I'd already seen the movie by this point, and so there's only two explanations here, Miguel. Either I was so horrified that my mind like completely made it block out everything that I saw, or more likely I was just too young and couldn't remember any of it. But I did not remember one frame of that movie. I could not believe, but my sister insists that my mom, I must have been tiny, but she insisted it was one of my mom's favorite movies.
Oh
So I
wow,
guess
that's
I
cool.
had seen it at 4 years old or something. I really don't know. But I did read the blurb on it when I was looking, and I said, "Oh,
Yeah.
this sounds interesting. This sounds kind of like up my alley." So, which is why I chose it in the first place. I told you we had this conversation at the Ghoulish Book Festival. I told you I'm not great with the slasher gore
Mhm.
stuff, and so this sounded interesting to me for sure.
Yeah. Or the third possibility is you're a bald faced liar.
That's true. It's true. I've seen it 50 times, and I'm like, I'm gonna go in there ultra prepared.
Yeah. So, I guess so. You kind of answered this already, but I kind of just wanted to make sure because I asked all my guests is what. So we asked about like your reading and how you got into like horror was through
Mm.
Stephen King, but in general, what is your history with horror? So it sounds like your mom liked it, or your parents liked it, and kind of brought you in. But did you have like did your siblings also like it? Did you have your outer family kind of like this as well? Or did you have like a group of friends that you would watch horror movies with on Friday nights growing up? That sort of thing.
No, no, it really wasn't like that. Like I can honestly say, like, I don't think I was ever really fully like obsessed with horror, like I think others in the horror community may have been. It's definitely something I enjoyed. And like when I was ready to write, it's definitely like what I gravitated towards. But there definitely wasn't, hey, let's get together in high school and watch a scary movie or anything like that. So like I think a lot of it did come from like my household. But
Okay.
then like as far as like like there's certain formative movies like Aliens, which is maybe more of an action movie, but like me and my cousins to this day just relentlessly call each other and like Ripley and all that kind of stuff.
That's
So those movies more than most kind of stuck with me and with us. And so my friends like in high school, um, and I drew on some of that, like for some of the rat stuff, like some friends I knew who were like totally all in on the paranormal stuff and all that. Like I would talk with them a lot about that in movies and all that. So, just growing up and as I got older, it seems like the most interesting discussions revolved around, horror movies and, stuff like that. And so, like I said, when it came time that I knew that's what I wanted to have in my work.
Why do you think that this particular movie passed you by? Since like, you
Mm.
had a little bit of background in it, and maybe you are like you said, you possibly had already seen it when you were earlier or when you were younger. But was this like one of those movies you had never really heard of, and then you saw it on the list, and you're like, I got to do it, or what was the case there?
Okay, so the only exposure I really remember is when I would see it on like lists of movies to watch for Halloween. So
Right.
I'd
Yeah.
see it, and so I was aware of its existence. But I mean, it's an old movie, so growing up, like, and it's not the kind of movie where you know like let's say Friday the 13th, where it's so embedded in public consciousness, where Joe
Right.
Blow is just going to know about it and talk about it and bring it up. So, yeah, it just seemed like it. I think, I guess it was kind of somewhere. Every time I see the list, I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting, but it just never got around to actually watching it.
Yeah, and this is a movie that I had seen maybe a decade ago, and when I had seen it, I was really confused by it. So I was like, it's all right. And then I would see it like you said on lists of best movies ever made or best horror movies ever made. I'm like, really that one? So when you chose it, I was like, I'll give it a second chance because I haven't. It's been over a decade since I've seen it. And then watching it for the podcast, I was like, wow, this is a really great movie. And as I write out the script for the podcast, I have to notice certain things. I have to pause it and go back and rewind it so I make sure that I know what the fuck I'm talking about when I'm discussing the movie. And so I see little details here and there. And specifically this movie, there's so much stuff that if you blink and miss it, you won't get it. Like it'll come back later on in the movie, and you're like, why did they just show that? And it's like, well, because they brought it up earlier. And yeah, so I'm so excited that you chose this movie, and I love how it kind of merges in a little bit with the your book. And so I'm really excited to talk this movie with you. But before we do that, I do this at the end as well, but I kind of wanted to give you a chance to say all your socials and how people can support you, how they can buy your book, all that sort of stuff.
Sure. Well, yeah, the ghost tracks you can pretty much buy anywhere. I mean, I'd prefer not Amazon if at all possible. Try to support your local independent bookstores if you
Same,
can.
yeah.
But yeah, you can pretty much get anywhere. There's an audiobook version that I love that is on Audible. The actor did a fantastic job with it. So I'm like really happy with how the audiobook turned out. So you can get it there. Um,
Yeah, I
I
might look that up. That would be like a different way to get the book again.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm on Twitter here and there. I'm not as active as I should be, but that's just under. I'm the only Celso Hurtado out there, I promise. So I'll be easy to find. Same on Instagram, but I pop on there even less. But Twitter's probably the best place. Um, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. So today you've come on to confess your horror movie sin of never having watched Don't Look Now. Is that correct?
That is correct. I am a sinner.
All right. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Don't Look Now. So Don't Look Now was directed by Nicholas. I'm going to say this name wrong. Reg Nicholas Roeg. So let's say Nicholas Rogue. And he directed The Man Who Fell to Earth, The Witches, Walkabout. Like he is kind of a legendary director who'd been around for a long time by the time he was directing this movie. And it's also starring somebody who like I've seen in other movies and is really good, but I don't know. Maybe he does get the respect he deserves, but I don't know. He's still alive. Donald Sutherland. He was born in '35. He's still alive, and in every movie that I've seen him in, he does just an absolutely amazing job. Obviously, he was in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is another '70s horror movie that's one of the always on the lists of best movies ever made, that sort of thing. And then it's also starring Julie Christie as his wife, Laura Baxter. Now, I know that Julie Christie is famous. I'm not sure what I've seen her in. I haven't seen Dr. Zhivago. I have seen Fahrenheit 451. Were you familiar with Julie Christie? I've heard the name, but I don't know if I'm familiar with everything that she's
I
done.
am absolutely not familiar with her.
But she does a great job here. She does an absolutely great job
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. Yeah, Donald Sutherland, talking about like formative horror experiences. I mean, the end of The Body Snatchers was definitely one for me because I remember watching that and just being shocked at the end when he's like pointing and screaming and all that kind of stuff. And oh man,
Yeah.
that like really did it for me. So, he's got that very distinct face, that demeanor that just makes him interesting to watch somehow in general, just existing on the screen, much less when he's utilizing all his skills. So there's something about watching him. It's pretty interesting.
And he's got like the distinct like baritone
Mm,
voice and the mustache. Um, yeah, it's I enjoy him in everything he does. He brings a certain amount of seriousness to a role
mm,
in any role that he's in.
yeah, yeah.
And then pretty much everybody else in this film is kind of like I wouldn't say unknowns, but these are the
Right.
stars. They kind of put their money in these two stars, and they kind of hit it out of the ballpark. Like their relationship, I never questioned it whatsoever. Like they were always they were close, and I bought the chemistry that they had.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who the casting director was, but I mean, I think they did a great job all the way around because those sisters were good. I
Ooh,
mean,
yeah,
oh my
yeah,
God, I don't know how they picked them or what, but I mean, every time they were on the screen, I'm like, man, this is the good stuff right here. Like that was pretty unbelievable.
agreed, agreed. So the movie starts in a downpour. We hear thunder as we zoom into a pond, and the title appears on the screen. We see sunlight filtered through some shutters as we hear a man humming, then the scene fades. And we actually see those same shutters later on in the movie, which when I was watching it again, I was like, holy shit, like, so it's not really a linear movie. Like, they're showing you scenes from out of time, and you don't get that until you get to the end of the movie, which I absolutely loved. Next, we see a little girl, Christine Baxter, in a red slicker or rain jacket pushing a wheelbarrow in a beautifully lush countryside. Horses roam freely as a beautiful piano arrangement plays, and a little boy rides his bike through the scenery. Come to find out that's her brother, Johnny Baxter, little Johnny Baxter. So he rides his bike through the scenery. The little girl is playing with an action figure, pulling its string to make it speak, which I thought was really cool. Christine finds a red and white striped ball and tosses it, and it goes into the pond. But still unsure, she attempts to get the ball from the pond. As she does so, we see in the background a beautiful house in the countryside. Inside the house, a fire roars as Laura and John Baxter are doing their own things, but together, which I love to see. That's what me and my wife do as well. We just like we hang out together, but we're doing our own
Mm.
things.
Yeah.
Laura is reading by the fire, and John is working. And we can tell that these dudes got money by how tastefully appointed the inside is. So John is reviewing some slides on a projection screen of insides of churches. He seems to get stuck on what he's looking at, so he asks his wife what she's reading. And it's like typical marriage stuff. Like, I'm bored right now, so let me go mess with my spouse. Laura says that she was just trying to find the answer to a question that their child Christine asked her. And basically, Christine is a flat earther, right? Because she wants to know if the world is round, why is a frozen pond flat? And John laughs and says that's a good question. And I'm saying they got a family of flat earthers here. But I actually like that she didn't know the answer to a question. This is pre-internet. This is 1973, and so she couldn't get the answer on the internet, so she had to look it up. So then John looks at his stills and he sees a red shape on it, and he pulls it out of the projector to get a better look at it, and it looks like the red slicker that Christine wears. This is going to be a running theme throughout the movie. Back outside, Christine is still playing unsupervised by the pond, and then a cool shot of her reflection off of it while her brother Johnny rides around the woods on his bike. So I had a question for you. You grew up in, we might be the same age. You might be younger than me. I'm not sure. But did you grow up like in the 80s?
Yeah, I am. I'm actually 46. I'm old, Miguel.
Okay. Well, I'm 40. I'm almost 40. So we're right there. So you didn't have like helicopter parents, right? Like we went outside and
Sure.
played,
Yeah.
right? So when I was seeing this now, I'm like, holy shit, where are her parents? Where are their parents? But this is kind of how kids were raised, back then. Just going outside, and you had to come home by the time by the time the lights came on.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's that. My favorite movies are the kind where you see the end and you have to go back and reinterpret everything that you saw, and that opening scene. I didn't have time, but I wanted to go back and watch it because it just seems so rich with now that you know what you know, right? Um, it means a little bit more. It means a little different. So everything as you're describing it, even now, I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't catch that the first time, kind of thing. But yeah, I think there's a scene where the brother's like riding over broken glass or something.
I'm like, oh my God, like, yeah, there something bad's going to happen. But it's great because it's that foreboding, like you can see they're playing with fire. They're just riding his bike over grass and she's playing by the water. And it's that tension that makes it interesting. And that tension is so hard to generate and to see how masterfully it does it. Because I know I felt extremely anxious. I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? So, it was awesome.
Yeah, they're like a master of suspense and tension in this one. Like they build to this dread. Like I've talked about this before. I just got done doing a full season on 70s movies where, and this is another 70s movie where they took the time. They had the balls to take the time to build this dread, and so it's kind of a slow burn, and then you get everything at the end. Nowadays, people don't have a lot of people just don't have the patience for that slow burn type of movie. And I think they did just a great job of that here, of building that. And then also, like I said, there's some sort of not time travel, but like, like things that we think are happening right now actually were just shots of what happened in the future, but we're seeing them now. And then when they happen, we think back to the where we saw them originally, and it's just like it's very circular.
Mm,
I really like
yeah,
that.
absolutely. Like I love having to put the puzzle pieces together. Like that is my favorite
Right.
thing, and that is very much what this is like. Because yeah, you'd have to watch it like multiple times, I think, to really get through everything that they've kind of planted in there. Like, oh, he saw that then, but that was really when that happened before, and that's gonna happen, but that hasn't happened yet. Like, that's really
Yeah.
cool, man. And so, yeah. The other thing I like what they did, and I'm sure you're gonna get to this here in a minute, but right before the terrible thing happens, he jumps out and he runs outside. And the
Right.
entire movie, I was wondering, how did he know to do that? Like, how did he know to do that? And then they explain it, and then everything kind of really makes sense. And I'm like, oh man, that's so brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, yeah. So let's get to it. So they're back in the house. John, like I said, senses a disturbance in the force and looks up from his slides, while Laura seems to have found the answer to her question. She says that the pond curves some degrees from side to side, so frozen water isn't in fact flat. To which John says, "Nothing is as it seems." And I think, I wonder if that's going to come back at all, you know?
Yeah.
So he asks her a question to which she responds. Then she touches her lips with her fingers, and then we get an insert shot of Christine doing the same thing, which I thought was very cute, having the same mannerisms as your parent. But you can't help but think, do they mean something by it? Because everything means something in this movie. Um, Back outside, Johnny is checking the damage on his bike while Christine taunts him with her action figure, which says "enemy in sight." And I kind of love that they kind of seem like out of the box parents, right? Like they kind of let their kids roam on this estate, and they let their child, this girl, play with like a army action figure. Which nowadays we're like, yeah, hell yeah, that's you play with whatever you want. But like back then, there was like stricter roles for kids. Blue and pink and Barbies and GI Joes and stuff like that. In the meantime, Christine has retrieved the ball but throws it back into the pond. Into the pond, sorry. In the house, John has clumsily spilled a glass all over his desk. And so they're just going back and forth between inside and outside. Outside, the red and white striped ball swirls on the surface of the pond while Johnny attends to his bike. John reviews the damage to one of his stills, and he sees the red splotch move over the whole image like blood. And that comes back later on as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we get, and again, this is like a connection with your book, oh, man, and Billy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And because he's a precog, right? And he sees something in Erasmus' future that is kind of similar to what we're talking about here with blood and stuff. I don't want to give everything away.
That's right. That's right.
But so just making those connections, right? So we get another insert of Johnny hightailing it, while inside, John seems to again feel like something bad has happened. And Laura asks him, "What's the matter?" He replies, "Nothing," but he walks out of his office. Then he starts running, like you were saying earlier. And these shots are just going back and forth, back and forth. And we've seen Christine in the pond now as she goes under the surface of the water for the final time. John now is in full sprint mode as he exits the house. Johnny running towards the house, calling for his dad. John runs right into the pond. Fuck, that had to be cold. Like I can hear I can hear him go
Mm.
because it's so cold, you know. And he sees the ball. He scans for his daughter until his eyes stop on something under the surface. Back inside, Laura is reviewing the slide that had the liquid spilled on it, but tosses it aside. As she does, the stain liquid thing seems to expand, going across the whole picture, which is of a stained glass in a church. Back outside, John has pulled Christine's body from under the water. Unfortunately, she's drowned. It's a slow motion shot of him hugging her to his chest, screaming in agony, holding her little hand in his. The shot of the stained glass as the liquid almost fully takes over the image. Then we're back with John in his agony. So on shore, John blows air into Christine, but stops after a few breaths. Just blowing in her mouth, no chest compressions or anything. I looked up CPR, like this, because the history of CPR, because I want to be like he didn't even try anything, and the idea of CPR was just like quote unquote invented in like the 50s, but it didn't start to gain momentum until like 1973 in America, where this organization, I forget the name of what it was called, but this organization held the world's largest gathering of people trying to learn CPR. And eventually they did teach over 100,000 people to be able to do CPR with chest compressions and all that sort of stuff. But that was 1973. This movie was made in 71. And so I just don't think that CPR was as prevalent as we know it now today, you know? So I was being very like, what the fuck are you doing? Start chest compressions. But I just don't think it was there yet. So
Sure.
when you're watching that movie, just understand that, you know, it's just heart wrenching to see.
Well, Miguel, I definitely didn't know I was going to learn about the history of CPR today. So I definitely,
I try to give you a little
I
something, you
appreciate
know?
that. You know, one thing about that scene that, you know, I kind of feel like with a lot of movies, you forget about them right away. You're like, oh, I think I saw that a few years ago or whatever. But one of the things that make them memorable are obviously, you know, imagery. And one thing I know I'm going to remember from this movie is him standing there holding his daughter, screaming. Like that was kind of a heart wrenching image, and you know they did a fantastic job because it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the movie because you know their grief kind of overshadows everything that happens um, afterwards, and to see him in that kind of like animalistic, you know, just fury and sadness and grief, it was striking.
Yeah, yeah, this definitely is a story about grief, about the loss of a child, but it's also about haunting and you know premonitions, that sort of stuff. That you know they mixed a bunch of genres in, kind of
Yeah.
similar to your book. So yeah, the next we're back with John and Christine. John picks her up and he's just moaning and crying, and Johnny just stares as finally Laura comes out of the house and she sees what happens and she yells. So then we get a very abrupt cut here. It's a jump cut, and we don't really even know how much time has passed. But as you know, while I was reading about the story, it seems to have been 8 months.
Hmm.
All right, so it's still fairly fresh in their minds. You know, I mean, I'm sure when you lose a child, as much time has passed, it's still fresh in your mind. But as for right now, in the movie, 8 months has passed. John is watching a man drill into some masonry, and he speaks Italian to the man, and he walks away. He's in Italy. Looks, it's Venice. Have you ever had a chance to go to Italy or
I have
Venice?
not.
Neither have I. But like you always see like the touristy parts of it, and it all looks polished and stuff like that. We don't see that here. We see like the dirty,
Hmm.
grimy, like filthy garbage strewn about Venice. You know, which I really appreciated, and I know the director when he was talking. Uh, when I was doing research for it, he was saying that he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do this kind of spit shined
Mm.
version of Venice. He wanted the dirty part, and we definitely get to see that here.
Yeah. You know that talking about that jump, that cut from where they find her body to now they're in Venice, kind of thing. It was
Mm.
jarring because I'm like, wait, what happened? Like, you know, in a typical movie, you might see the funeral, or you might say, hey, I need to take a job in Venice, and they just kind of cut. But you know, I wonder if it was like, wonder if it was purposeful, like to add to your disorientation, because like the idea of like
Yeah.
not because even in that first scene when they're cutting back and forth, you're like, wait, what's going on? There's two different things going on at once, and something terrible is going to happen. Now we're cutting direct to Venice after all this stuff happened. I mean, I did feel a little, out of bearings, which I appreciate. Like, I like feeling a little lost. Like, I don't know what's going on. So, I mean, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I liked it. It's almost like, they're not holding your hand to here's what scene naturally follows the next. Just like figure it out. He took a job and it's 8 months later and all that kind of stuff. So I like that.
Yeah, exactly. And also, this movie's already at an hour 50, and so I appreciate them like cutting that out because they're like, yeah, of course, there's gonna be a funeral. You don't
Right.
need to see it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly what you said. Like it respects its viewer. It knows that we're smart enough to understand, and that we're already along for the ride, and so we're just gonna put our hands in. We're gonna put ourselves in the hands of this capable storyteller and just go along for the ride.
Yeah, man. It was
Right.
cool. Yeah, it was one thing watching the movie. To your point about like the gritty, ugly side of it, it was neat. Where it was like it's like a maze, and so sometimes you're along the river canal and there's a bunch of people there and you take two turns and then you're like in some horrific alley and you might get mugged any second or whatever. I thought that was really
Right.
cool.
Yeah. There's definitely a sense of feeling unsafe, especially at night when they're alone. There's even a point later on in the movie where like they have closed for the season and a lot of shops have closed up and a lot of like tourists have disappeared, and so it's just like John alone with the pigeons,
Yeah.
and you feel a sense of unease, which was I think done
Yeah.
masterfully. So John meets Laura for lunch. He discusses his work a bit, saying he either restores a fake or let it sink into the sea. So he's kind of not happy with where his work is at right now. And Laura was writing a letter to Johnny. It seems he has not joined them on this trip. And John is distracted, though, by two older women sitting at a table across the room from them. They seem to be staring at John, and he stares back. John suddenly feels a draft in the room, and he goes to close the window. And when he does, this causes the airflow to go through the other door that's open. So then this blows something into the old woman's eyes. And it's like, that's so weird. What a weird thing to do. So John asks if she wants him to sign the letter, but she tells him to write his own letter. That's like typical dad behavior. I'm not even a dad, and I do that. Like when my wife writes out a letter, like a birthday card or something like that, I'm like, hey, can I just sign it at the end? She's like, sure, sure. So then the waiter finally comes, and John orders for them both in Italian, which I think is very. It's like that's kind of hot. He's a good looking dude, and we're gonna see a lot of him later on. So the fact that he speaks Italian is able to order dinner for him and his wife, kind of hot. As he finishes up the order, the woman who got something in her eye bumps into their table on the way to the bathroom, and John notices a pearl brooch on her jacket as Laura goes and helps them find the facilities. Now, I thought that this brooch was going to come back, and we do see it later on in the movie, but it doesn't really. It's like you got to pay attention, sort of thing. But I was thinking something would happen with that, but unless I missed it, nothing really came of that
Yeah,
one.
I don't, yeah, nothing happened plot wise, but I mean, I'm assuming it was like probably some artsy reason that went right over my head that it symbolized,
Right.
some version of the other. And I'm terrible with deciphering stuff like that, Miguel. But was it a moon or what? I can't remember what it was.
It was like a moon with like pearls hanging from it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, like
So
you said, there's probably something behind
yeah,
that,
the moon represents, whatever. But I'm sure it was. I mean, because it is a very artsy movie, which I
Mm.
appreciate. But I'm sure anytime I see something along those lines, I feel like, oh my god, I probably missed like at least half of what they intended us to figure out. But to your point about the thing being blown in her eye or whatever, I was like,
Mhm.
wow, I don't think I've ever seen that used as a plot point in a movie before. So I'm like, I should in my next book that should be like a big plot point. Some character got a thing in their eye and now they have to do something. So I may rip that off.
But like it's like small consequences of small
Mm,
actions lead to bigger things, you
yeah.
know. Um, but in the bathroom, the old women apologize for staring, saying it comes from living in the countryside. One thing I wanted to mention before we start talking about these two women is that we never know what their role is in the movie until the very end. So again, like Even like the police inspector that we meet, he's acting weird. The bishop acts weird, and so like we're always uneasy. We're never on like sure
Like, what
footing
are their motives? You mean,
because
kind of stuff. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
exactly what their motives are. You know, specifically when we're talking about these two sisters. So Laura offers to help dab the thing out of the old woman's eye. The women are sisters, and they're called Heather and Wendy. Heather is blind and can't help get the object out of her sister's eye, obviously. We then get a close up shot of her eyes. And I am not, I should have looked this up actually, but I'm not an expert in what a vision impaired person's eyes looks like. So this could have been like, I'm sure this was ratcheted up for like effect, you know, but it looks like her eyes are like completely glassed over. Like she has like a really, I've seen like glaucoma cases and it looks like that, you know. So I don't know how true to how accurate this is, but it looks really really cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. So like, yeah, I suspect exactly like what you said. They had it in there because it looks amazing, and it adds to that kind of real creepy vibe. I mean, I know, I sometimes when I'm trying to create something, I want to have like the weirdest image possible, but then you have to explain it, and it may not be completely accurate by the letter of the law. I'm like, it sounds good, it looks good. I'm gonna leave that image in there, or it's hard to explain it. So I kind of appreciate they just put it in there and then like, yeah, y'all figure it out. It's like maybe she let her glaucoma go and never had the surgery, or who knows. But
Yeah.
like,
Oh
but it's
yeah.
better, it's probably better to have the image than to have, some note from a studio rep saying, "Why don't you make her eyes look a little more normal?" So
Yeah.
I thought it was cool.
Well, you're right. They never explain how she went
Right.
blind. Like she either was born with it or later on in life she got glaucoma and never had surgery and that sort of thing. So that's right. So back in the restaurant, John is reading the letter and looks outside to the water, and we get a flashback to the house where Christine died, and it's pouring rain, and they're driving away, their possessions packed up. We zoom into the pond again, then the scene fades into a close up of Heather's eyes back in the bathroom, which I thought was a really cool
Mm-hmm.
transition. Laura has successfully removed the foreign object from Wendy's eye. She's then told she resembles Wendy's daughter. Suddenly, Heather says, "You're so sad, and there's no need to be. She wants you to know. I've seen her, and she wants you to know she's happy." And she's talking into the mirror, and Laura is seeing Heather's reflection in that mirror as she's being told this. And the effect is very creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Really well done. Really, like it's like a great shot. And the old woman then tells her that Wendy is a psychic. She goes on to say, Heather goes on to say that she's seen her little girl sitting between you and your husband, and she was laughing. Yes, oh yes, she is with you, my dear, and she's laughing. Heather then says she's wearing a shiny little Mac, which I we figured that's what they call raincoats. This causes Laura to say Christine's name, and Heather continues to say that Christine is laughing. She's as happy as can be as we get an insert shot of Christine frolicking in the field. Back in the restaurant, John is again looking at the still from that day, and he looks around for his wife, who's been gone for a long time. Back in the bathroom, Heather now has Laura sitting down with her back against the towel wall. Heather is feeling her face to get her features, and she says, or I think Wendy says, "Oh, you would like how she looks, right?" So that's kind of creepy. Like you didn't necessarily need to feel her face while she was passed out.
Yeah.
That's some sort of assault or something, you know.
That's funny. Yeah.
But apparently, yeah, apparently Laura had passed out, um, and they wave smelling salts under her nose to revive her. And then Laura asks to be left alone, and she'll be fine. As they're walking out, Laura asks Heather if she really saw Christine, and she says she was there. And then Laura is left in the bathroom with the attendant, which is very, very awkward. I always hate when there's an attendant, you know, where when you have to tip, like when we go out to a club or something like that. I'm like, I didn't carry any cash. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is very awkward. I'm not gonna lie. Well, the other thing is, like, sometimes you have to ask people, who are you with? Hey, do you have $1? I gotta go to the bathroom or something, because you don't want to go in there empty-handed, because then you feel bad, and it's a mess.
Yeah, it's like we are like almost fully transitioned to a credit or like a debit card culture. Like, can't you get? I used to see one of those machines where you can just put in your credit card real quick and it would just tip a
Oh
dollar.
yeah, yeah.
You know, like those aren't that expensive. Let's. It's 2022,
Well, I mean,
people.
let
Let's
me
go.
preface this by saying I've not been to a club in a long time, Miguel. Is it? Have they updated? Is it still just dollars? I don't know. Maybe we're out of it.
Yeah, dollars are. Well, like first of all, like I'm not gonna take whatever cologne you have at the club. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna buy a condom off of you. I'm not gonna buy gum off of you. Like I have to go to you because you have the paper
Right.
towels and that's
Yeah.
it, you know. So that sucks, and I feel bad. Like I don't carry cash anymore. So it's also to be clear, it's also been a long time since I've been in a club. So they might have, right? It's been at least like 10 years or seven since I've been to Austin, since I've
Yeah.
been to a club. So they might have
There might be
updated
some
it.
young guy laughing at us like these losers. They don't even know how it is anymore. So
My friend Anthony, who Anthony Jerome, who was the co-host from with me in season 2, he calls people like me, like us, and old. So we're totally olding out right now. So I'm sure I'm going to hear that because he listens
yeah.
as well. Great, thanks, Anthony. As the sisters are walking out, Wendy says, "I felt you were right. I felt we should." And I don't know what that means. Did you catch that? And do you have any or do you have an understanding of what they meant by that?
Hmm.
So I guess they were talking about confronting them. Maybe she really didn't have anything in her eye,
Oh,
and they were
oh,
just
oh.
using that as a reason to connect with
Okay,
her.
yeah, that
You
make I
know,
mean that makes sense.
yeah, because she is a precog, and so she had already seen the daughter, and so
Yeah,
maybe she wanted to warn her
yeah,
something
because
like
like,
that. You know,
what are the odds that she would see this thing and they happen to all end up in the bathroom together and all that? So yeah, I mean, yeah, that would make sense that
yeah,
they kind of made it happen. So funny. You're right. There are a lot of parallels. too.
yeah. So maybe you're a precog, and you chose this movie for a
Yeah, it's
reason.
true. Time's a flat circle, like True Detective says. So
Yeah. So in the bathroom, Laura sits gathering her thoughts. Outside, John notices the sisters paying and walking out. As Wendy looks back at him, Laura finally makes it out of the bathroom and goes to sit down, but had to immediately stand up. But it's too late. She passes out again, tumbling over and taking the table and the food with her. Now, here's the thing. John makes this worse by like literally pushing the food and olive oil like onto her as like he's getting up. I don't know if you noticed it, but it was really funny and clumsy. Like, dude, you just like pushed all this stuff onto your wife, you know?
well, was it like was he trying to like I guess was he trying to help or move it out of the way? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly right. I think he was trying to like to reach for her, but also like reach for the food, and like, so it wouldn't all fall on her. But in the process, just makes it
That's
worse. I
funny.
was like, it's something I would have done. You're like, fuck, you
Yeah.
know. But eventually, she's taken out of the restaurant on a stretcher and transported via like a water ambulance. I don't know what they call them,
Mhm.
but it looks really cool. It's just a boat instead of a. It's like a boat instead of an ambulance, which is I really like to see. It's funny to see the difference in culture when in a city that has all these canals. You know how they get around and all that.
Yeah, that's cool. In Vegas, we had gone to I guess the Venetian, and they kind of mimic the kind of waterway and the little bridges and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of funny because it is kind of like a maze there too. You'll kind of get lost. That's the only hotel we got lost in because of all the like little twists and turns and all that. But yeah, you have to go over the waterways and stuff like that. So
Oh, that's
yeah, it's
cool.
cool, man. If you ever go, you should go look around there. It's nice.
So my family lives in Vegas, so I go there at least once a year to visit. But we just, it's like the locals.
Mm-hmm.
We don't go to the hotels. We don't go to the casinos and stuff like that. So I really haven't experienced a lot of the stuff that people go to Vegas to
Mm-hmm.
do. But that sounds cool. So I might. I mean, it might be free to walk around hotel. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. You just waltz in,
So
and
I might
yeah,
check
you
that
just
out.
go from like casino to casino and walk around and stuff. Totally
Yeah.
off topic, but I'm gonna show my age here for a minute. So the last time we went, um, uh, I had some time to myself because the rest of my party was going to go see the Jonas Brothers, my girlfriend and my daughter, and so I had the night to myself. And Sting happened to be playing, so I'm like, well, he's not like top of my list, but I got nothing else to do. I'm gonna go see Sting. Miguel, that was one of the best things I've ever seen in my entire life. Oh my God, I
Sting in
yes,
concert.
I turned into this huge Sting fan in my old age. But it was unbelievable. It was one of the best things I've ever seen in my entire life. So if you ever have a chance,
Was it like a Great production value? Was like he's swinging from the
It
rafters
was
or
mainly the songs. Like he came right out off the bat and did this like acoustic version of Roxanne, right? And then like
okay.
this whole band kicked in and he went into SOS and it was crazy. And then at the end he ends it with like this big rock and roll normal version of Roxanne. But yeah, the production value
Okay.
is great. He has a residency in Vegas, and so it's Caesars, and so it's just a great place to see it. So I think he's going back like in April next year. So if you're there to see your family, I recommend going to go see Sting.
Go check out
Yeah,
Sting. Okay, cool. I'll keep that in mind. I've never seen any, like I said, I've never seen any shows or anything like that in
no,
Vegas. So I'm definitely due for one.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. I mean, you should go check out a magic show too. Those things are pretty amazing.
Is there something called like the Magic Castle, or is that in
Oh,
California? I think maybe that might be in Los
yeah.
Angeles.
We went to go see Chris Angel. I'm gonna be honest. It
Okay.
was just all right. The Mind Freak show. So it was just okay for us. The first time I'd gone to Vegas, I'd seen a different magic show. It was like a bunch of magicians performing together. I think it was the Masters of Illusion, and that one was pretty amazing. But yeah, I mean those shows are fun. I mean that's like I'm not a big gambler, so when we go, it's for stuff like
Right. Yeah. I don't gamble either. Uh, I went gambling for like my 21st birthday, I think. Yeah, 21st birthday, and I took like $20 and I lost them, and I'm like, all right, I'm done.
that.
I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
All right. So, all right. Thank you for the recommendation. I'll definitely keep that in mind. So then Laura was transported to the nearest hospital, which was a children's hospital. And John walks in to speak with her, and she blurts out that Christine is still with them. He says very dryly, I'm sure he probably thinks that she's, still messed up from her faint, that Christine is dead. And she says, of course she is. And she's very happy and very chipper. And then she then explains what she means. She explains about Wendy and Heather, and she says that Heather has second sight. She says how they described what Christine was wearing that day. Laura says that she feels fine. She doesn't need pills. She's not crazy. She feels better than she's felt in months. As they're leaving, we see one of the kids is playing with a red and white striped ball. So that we kind of see that throughout the movie as
Mm-hmm.
well. Um, and then also Laura like asked him, "Don't you believe me?" And John kind of feels like he's just because he didn't want to have an argument. Says, "Yeah, I believe you. I believe you," but we know that he doesn't really believe her. So then later, they're taking a water taxi down the river, but are stopped by Italian police saying that there's been a murder and that they can't go that way. So they have to go down another canal. And it's hilarious to see the boat driver like flipping off the police, with just this like old school like hand in your left hand in like the crook of your right arm doing one of these sort of things. I haven't seen that in a very long time. Laura asks if this is where he works, but John says no. They're looking at a church, and I didn't catch if that came back in the end. I don't know if that was the church where he ends up in at the end of the movie. I'll just say that. But
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny. There were so many times where I thought, "Is that going to be something? Is that going to be something?"
mm,
And then, I'd almost have to go back and rewatch it to see if it was, because I think a lot of it wasn't. Almost like the brooch. You know how you're saying like, "Oh, maybe that's going to come back later," but I think
yeah,
because we're kind of on high alert, like what means something and what doesn't. And I think though maybe some of those things just didn't mean anything. They're just there for us to kind of like take note of and small moments. But I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch this sometime because now I'm fairly curious what I missed the first go around.
yeah. This is one of those movies that definitely rewards you on rewatch. You know, so yeah, this is has high rewatchability for me. So as they're passing the church, Laura asks to stop to say a prayer, but it's closed. And then he kind of looks at her, she looks at him, and he's like, "Oh, Laura." And they end up going to a church. And John very snobly says he doesn't like that particular church at all. And Laura says, basically you're crazy. It's a beautiful church. So Laura says her prayer and lights 6 candles for Christine. While she is doing so, John notices Wendy, one of the sisters, in a tour group and hides so she can't see him. Then we see Heather like creepily playing around in the church, just like touching things and like happily exclaiming, "Ah." I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, it was definitely strange. Well, it
Yeah.
does kind of again, and I love this kind of stuff. Like makes you think, well, what is their deal? how do they keep ending up at these same places together? Yeah, why is she acting that way? But I love that kind of stuff because it adds to this kind of idea of what the hell is actually going on here. One thing I did notice about that scene is the husband and wife seem to be on different wavelengths. Like, yeah, she loves the church, he hates it. She's lighting candles, and they made a point of showing him turning the lamp on and off. And I'm like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
funny. Are they trying to tell us something that she's with this old school candle stuff and he's with the technology, turning the light off and off? Are they dealing with things in different ways, kind of
Ah,
things? You know what I mean? Because they went out of their way to show it, so I'm sure it means something, whatever that is.
right. You're right. You're so right. I didn't even realize that. Like they're in different wavelengths. She's doing the candle and he's doing the light. That's great. Little stuff like that that you
It's
might
little
miss.
stuff like that's rewarding. I mean, I'm sure you could go deeper into it, like maybe how they're processing their child's trauma. Like they're obviously diverging because she's in a good place after this, and after she was told that Christine is there, and he's just not having any of it. But yeah, I mean, I think those things I think are often kind of missing in our current movie landscape. But so it's good to see. It's good to see stuff like that and remind you what how things can be.
Mm-hmm. So then Laura actually scares John, to which he exclaims, Jesus, and she calls him a hypocrite. They run out of the church late for a meeting, and we see as they're walking out or running out, one of the 6 candles that she lit goes out. What does it mean? We don't know. An ominous, maybe it's an ominous thing. But one thing I wanted to say was that what I what I like about them, what she says, she calls him a hypocrite because he exclaims Jesus, and they're in a church, but maybe he doesn't really believe in the church, in Jesus, and maybe he's not really religious, but he works for the church. It might even be the Vatican because they're in Italy, right? And so he's possibly working for like the head organization for corporate, and he doesn't really believe. And it kind of reminded me of Erasmo, like he's dealing with all these the ghosts and the possession and that sort of stuff, but we never really, at least unless I misunderstood, like we never really know maybe until the end whether or not where he stands and whether or not it's real or not. Like, is Erasmo a true believer or not?
So I'll just tell you real quick. We're gonna get off topic, but so I told you it went through a lot of different drafts. So
Mm.
originally, you're gonna laugh, but he was a hardcore skeptic. Not only that, his he was doing it for good reasons because of his grandmother. But originally, as I had thought of it, he was not an expert in the paranormal. He just saw an easy way to make
Mm.
money. So he was kind of scamming these people. And
Okay.
because he didn't believe any of it. And then as these cases presented themselves and he saw these inexplicable things happening, he kind of comes around to wait, maybe some of this stuff is true. And some of that skepticism stays in the ghost tracks when you read it. Like, because he doesn't, you know, he has his doubts for sure about some of the things going on. And that kind of idea of is he a true believer or is he not is kind of like one of the main questions. Like, what does he really believe in? Because there's a scene in the book kind of towards the end where he kind of questions everything and he admits some hard truths to himself about what he may or may not really believe or what he thought he believed.
Mm.
So it's an open-ended question, I guess.
Cool. And I love that. I love that part because I'm a skeptic. I grew up in the Catholic Church, but I am a skeptic. So I love that you left it up to interpretation.
Yeah.
So John has gone to meet a bishop, and he's an hour and a half late, and the dude is still there. Like, fuck that. Like, I'm rescheduling after 10 minutes, my
Yeah.
guy. Yeah. But that's that like 70s before pre cell phone shit where like you just had to
Yeah.
wait, or you wouldn't see that person for weeks or months later.
Yeah.
So Laura kisses the bishop on his hand and apologizes, saying it wasn't John's fault. The bishop has invited them to stay with him, which they accept and will be meeting him later in the week. John is trying to show the bishop the work they've done so far to restore the church, but he's not really interested in it. And the bishop says that the churches belong to God, but God doesn't seem to care about them. He says, "Does he have other priorities? We have stopped listening." So like this bishop is going through like some shit of his own,
Right. Yeah.
like some doubts he might be having. And he asks if Laura is a Christian, and she says she doesn't know. She says she's kind to animals and children. But to me, like, she just said a prayer and lit candles. So what do you mean? Of course you are. You know, that was kind of like I didn't understand. Maybe she just felt uncomfortable with it, with the question, because she does say something a little bit
Sure.
later.
Sure.
He tells her Saint Nicholas of this church is the patron saint of children and scholars. An interesting combination. He says goodbye, that they'll talk more on Thursday. And John says he doesn't think that the bishop cares about the restoration of the church at all. And Laura asks why he asked if she was Christian. And John says, because you kissed his ring. Why the fuck did you do that? Which I found, he said, I found that out myself, and so did I personally. That was really weird.
Yeah.
And Laura says that the bishop makes her feel uneasy. So again, this is like maybe a red herring here. We don't know if something's going to come back with the bishop. But we find out that he might also be a precog.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll get to that scene, I guess. But yeah, when that happened towards the end, I had that same thought. I'm like, wait a minute, is this? Because he seems out of sorts during the movie too. And like, is this why he's out of sorts? Is he think something's gonna happen or what? But like you said, he's definitely got his own stuff going on. But maybe he's also sensing that things just aren't quite right.
So then they walk to their hotel and they're greeted by the concierge. As they walk by, he makes some funny gestures indicating he thinks John is like full of himself. And I wish I understood Italian at that point. Up in their room, Laura looks in her suitcase and sees the red and white ball and smiles. That's kind of, I don't know, creepy. Or the ball, your child's ball that she went into the lake or the pond to get and then drowned, and you're taking that with you. I don't know how. Well, what did you have any feelings about that?
No, I mean, so you would think it would carry negative connotations, right? To see that and
Mm.
have that around. But I I suspect. I mean, I suspect they would say, well, everyone processes grief differently, and this is what reminds her of maybe the good times that she played with the ball with her daughter, or something along those lines. I would guess, or maybe the answer is it's just meant to unsettle us, because it's kind of like,
Mm.
why would you have this? Like, there's something wrong with you that you would find comfort in this horrific remnant of your child's death, right? Because we're talking about it, right? I mean, like, why? It maybe it's just for the discomfort of it.
Mm. Yeah, and like if she just wanted a memento of her child, she could have chosen
That's
anything else. It didn't
right.
necessarily have to be that thing,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
But a lesser movie would have like had her open it up and see that ball and be terrified, like who packed this sort of thing, you know.
Right.
But in the more capable hands, we see the ball and she's like, yeah, I brought that ball, you know. So we're talking about that more than we would have talked about like just a ball showing up in her suitcase, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, it's a small moment, but this movie is made up of small
Exactly.
moments.
Yeah.
You know? So Laura takes a bath while John does some work sketching and humming, and then we see the same blinds from the beginning of the movie that we saw. So what we saw earlier was actually not a flashback, a flash forward to this moment in time. And now John has taken a shower, and when he steps out, Laura fat shames him. This dude is skinny as fuck.
That was the weirdest part of the movie for me. Like, I could not believe that. It's unbelievable.
She says the lumps are reappearing on the side of your waist, which she just means love handles. And he like grabs some of his skin, and it's like, oh, okay, dude. I see. This is what we're doing. But she was kind of joking around, but also like he immediately goes to weigh
Yeah, he's
himself.
totally concerned. Like, after she says this, yeah.
Yeah. And then we get like an infinity ass and dick in the same pic sort of scene, like because he's reflected in the mirror, and it does one of those things where there's a mirror across from it, and so it's just like dick balls, dick balls, dick balls, just all the way around.
I'm sure that's what they had in the script.
Which
Dick balls, dick balls, dick balls. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we get full frontal female nudity, you know. So like, I don't think we get full frontal here, but we definitely see male bush. So it's like if we're gonna see one, we should see the other. You know, I've watched a lot of '80s movies, and the '80s is filled with women's breasts and stuff like that. And you don't see the lot of male nudity, and so got to have something for the people who are attracted to men.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that.
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, I'm sure we're going to hit on this topic, but Miguel, that had to have been the longest sex scene in the history of horror movies ever. I was not prepared for as much Donald Sutherland as I was going to see in that scene. As I kept thinking, well, surely it's almost over, and it was not almost over, Miguel. It kept going. Like there's got to be a
I
record.
was Yeah, I was impressed. It's really quite a spectacle of modern filmmaking, really.
It
but
really is. Yeah.
in this particular shot, we don't see the camera. I know, like in researching other movies, a lot of cameramen and cinematographers hate shooting mirrors because it's so difficult to get the angles right where you don't show up in it. And if you show up in the mirror, like that just kills kills the scene right away, especially in like the 70s and 80s where you can't like CGI it out, right?
Yeah.
But it was a really hard shot and they got it. And so he weighs himself and it's 190 pounds. And yeah, 190 pounds. He looks like a stick figure. But this whole scene of them just walking around naked, we see pubes, bush, very 70s of them. Next, John is seated at his drafting table naked, leaving streaks in the chair, no doubt. The maid knocks and Laura lets her in and she walks in on John naked at his table and she excuses herself. And he's like, ah. Like that's somebody who's truly like comfortable with their body where he's like, yeah, so what? I don't care. I would be like
Yeah,
screeching.
like what do you think the point of that small scene was where the maid walks in and sees him? Like just to show that he's like confident, or what do you think that was?
I don't think there was any. I don't know. I mean, because later on in the movie, after Laura has left for England and he goes back to the hotel, he runs into
Oh,
her
she's coming out
again
of the
and she kind of
bathroom.
gives
Is that
him
the one
a.
coming out of the bathroom?
She comes
Yeah.
out of the bathroom. Yeah, and she kind of gives him a look like, hey, So I don't know. Maybe that's was to explain that, and that he's desirable to other women,
Oh,
you
okay,
know.
maybe.
But I think honestly, like I just a
Funny
funny
scene.
scene. I
Yeah,
think.
like you said, I think there's
Yeah.
like sometimes there's just they have moments in there that aren't necessarily go anywhere or explainable. It's just an interesting thing to have in there, I guess.
Yeah, because life is made up of small moments, and not everything has to exactly match
Right.
up to the
Yeah.
story or what's happening. It gives you a chance to let your characters breathe and be more believable. You
Mm.
know. So later that night, lying in bed, John and Laura talk. She asks, "Isn't it a miracle that she didn't hurt herself when she fainted?" But he says, "Your reflexes just kick in." And I was thinking they have a really good relationship, seeing as how they've had a child that just died within the last 8 months. Like they don't really argue. They're still affectionate to each other. They're still very caring, which is really nice to see. Um, in other movies like this, we would have seen like the dissolution of their marriage within 8 months. And in real life too,
Right.
unfortunately,
Right.
it's a very traumatic experience that they went through.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Absolutely.
John is reading the newspaper in bed, naked, of course, and then Laura starts caressing his naked body, and then they get down to business. This is a very tender scene mixed with shots of them getting ready afterwards. And it's pretty graphic by today's standards, which is too bad because honestly, like, we should get rid of that puritanical shit and just like, sex is sex. Everybody's grown up. But like you said, this is a very infamous scene that went on for a very long time. Like different positions, like they go at it for a while. There's even a shot where I'm like, wait, how does that?
Yeah.
Like she was licking his toes and he was like at the other end. I'm like, what position is that?
That's like acrobatic stuff. It was pretty unbelievable. But like I can't imagine how hard it was to shoot all that. Like to your point, like oh my god, like it's a feat of filmmaking.
Yeah, and actually I was looking up behind the scenes on this, and the scene where they first, this scene, I'm sorry, that what we're talking about, the sex scene, that was actually the first scene that Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland met for the first
Oh my
time
god.
filming that scene. And that was the first scene that they shot, and it lasted 6 hours to get all the scenes, all the shots that Nicholas Rogue wanted.
Oh.
So they both like appeared on scene with their robes, and then they had like a little drink to kind of loosen them up, and then they disrobed and they just went at it. And the director would like call out things like, okay, touch her nipples or grab his ass or like put your legs between her. I'm sorry, put your hands between her legs, and then they would just do that, and they just kept going around for like 6 hours. And the both actors were like, it wasn't sexy at all. Like it was probably one of the most awkward things that we've ever shot. You know?
Wow. Well, it's something people talk about forever now. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, the intercut between the sex scene was scenes of them getting ready to go out for the night, and then they're kind of reminiscing. Like she's kind of thinking, like, I can't believe that, basically that they just had such a great sexual experience, and she's reminiscing about it just minutes after, like post-coital bliss sort of thing, right? And then she even like sniffs the sheets, like the fruit of their labor and whatnot. So that was like, she was really into it. They're both very attracted to each other, which is really
So
cool to
let me
see.
ask you this, because I was wondering about this. You mentioned how like they kept cutting to them getting dressed as if like
Hmm.
afterwards. So I mean, is this another way, I guess, of them like foreshadowing or letting us know that like the whole time is not linear thing? Because while they're doing it, they're also like flash forwarding and show us kind of what happened slightly afterwards. Um, I mean, I thought it was a neat effect. I hadn't really seen it that way before, but
Hmm.
I enjoyed it. I mean, I definitely spent some time thinking about why they kept intercutting like that.
Right. No, yeah, I agree. It's definitely trying to mess up with the timeline with it for us, but also it kind of serves to break up, because sex scenes can be awkward, especially when you're sitting in a theater full of people watching sex scenes, or at home with your, I mean, if you're watching with your family or something like that. So breaking it up with those little scenes is kind of like made it a little bit more
Sure,
bearable.
sure.
Like I can watch bodies like getting decapitated and like torn apart and like killed and drowned, no problem whatsoever. But like a 45 or a minute long sex scene, I'm like, oh geez, I'm like squirming in my chair, like, pushing out my collar, like, oh boy, So it's funny about that.
Yeah.
So then they walk to dinner as the concierge asks them if they'll be eating there tonight. They say no, they're going out. So it looks like they might be the only guests. And the concierge has the workers close the restaurant because they won't be eating there. Later in the night, Laura and John are lost in Venice, walking down dark alleyways. At first, they're having fun, but little by little, they start to get worried. John walks to one spot and says he knows this place somehow. And I meant to figure out if, and I don't know if you noticed it later on in the movie when he's lost. Does he come to that spot? Is that the spot where he sees the the figure in red for the first time?
I think so, but don't hold me to that. That
Yeah.
was my
Okay.
initial. That was my initial thought after I saw the movie, but I couldn't swear to it.
Yeah. So then Laura says she found the bridge that they need to be on, but John is across the way at another point. They then hear a man grasp for air and scream, which frightens them. And people start opening their shutters, and then John and Laura see a quick red flash as if a small child wearing a red coat had ran across their view, but about 20 yards away. I just got that now as we were talking, because later on we'll find out that there's a serial killer on the loose. We already found out one body earlier when they were on the water taxi. And so John thinks, they both think that they saw, I think maybe only John saw this one. John saw the vision of that figure in red crossing around a crossing, and he thought that he was experiencing some PTSD from Christine's death. But what we really come to find out was that's actually the serial killer,
Yeah. So
which is pretty crazy because I just found that out. I just realized that right now.
yeah. So like one thing I thought we were talking earlier about how they don't hold your hand through everything. So
Mhm.
when they're retrieving that body from the water, the person that he's with says, "Oh, like they found another body." Like in another movie, they'd have shown you like headlines, like "serial killer on the loose" and like TV, coverage of the serial killer. It's like a one line, and like, yeah, there's somebody killing people out there, and like you just got to like roll with it and kind of figure out that there's this, like, it's a serious problem, which I thought was kind of neat because at first I was like, bodies, like how many, what's going on, and then it's clear later on what's happening. But to your point about the him seeing that figure in the red, so are we entirely sure? Because I'm just thinking about this now. Was he actually seeing that figure, or was he seeing a premonition of the figure he was going to see later on?
That's true. Yeah, there's
No
no
way
way
to
to
know,
tell,
right?
right? Yeah, because the way they laid it out, and it's some movies that would be frustrating, but in this one, it's like it's cool. You like to see it because you once again you're unsure of
Right.
yourself.
And yeah, I mean that's my favorite kind of stuff. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So the next day at work, John is helping some men lift the statue in place. While he's up there, a crowd is gathered to watch him work, including Laura, and a bit further away, the two sisters, Heather and Wendy. John notices them and hopes that they don't go talk to Laura. He sees that she is walking their way and is distracted at work, and the statue almost falls off. Laura does see them and goes to say hi. Laura asks Heather if she remembers Christine, and Heather says that she does, and she describes her. Heather asks if she died suddenly, and Wendy says she has no right to ask that, but Laura says it's okay, she doesn't mind, and she would actually prefer to talk to them, but she's going to go get her coat. Meanwhile, John has removed the cover off the statue, revealing a really ugly ass statue. I don't know why they're restoring that one. But it fades into another ugly ass statue as the three women walk in a park. Laura describing the day Christine died. She says John suddenly ran to the pond as if he knew something. And like you were saying, and then Heather says, of course, that's it. The child was trying to talk to him because he has the gift. Laura asks if Wendy can contact the dead. She says it's a gift from God and considers it an impertinence to use her gift to try to speak to souls at rest for entertainment. And Laura says, well, it's not really for my entertainment. But so then the sisters invite her to tea after John gets off of work, but Heather makes no promises about her being able to contact Christine. Later, John refuses. Sorry. Later, Laura tells John about going to meet the two sisters, but John refuses, saying it's ridiculous. Laura says she's starting to feel like herself and these women are helping her. Then we get a smash cut scene of the two sisters laughing their butts off for a couple seconds. Then we're back with Laura and John. Again, I don't know why this happened. This one doesn't come back later on, but it does make us feel like we don't trust these sisters very much right now.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it's that kind of little dance between are they trying to help her? Are they trying to take advantage of her? What are they doing? So this is, now you're feeling kind of the other way, like maybe they're up to no good kind of thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that dance, that kind of like floating on the line of what their deal is one of the things the movie does best.
Yeah, I agree. So then John says, listen to me. And she says she has listened to him. He's the one who said, let the children play where they want, even down by the pond. It's like, oof, like low blow, lady. And John says, thanks for the memories. She doesn't really apologize. And she just says, she just reminds him that he said he'd give his life in exchange for Christine's. And he can't do that, but he can try this. But frustrated, he pushes Laura away and tells her to go to her crazy women if she wants. And he walks away. So I felt like this was out of character for Laura to just like pull this, like, just make this comment to John. I thought, like, I don't know, I would be completely devastated if that situation were to happen and my significant other were to bring it up like that.
Well, it was harsh. I mean, I had a moment when when she said it for sure. I wonder though if like, I wonder if those are just, everyone has kind of those thoughts they probably wouldn't say out loud. And those were probably one that
Yeah.
she had. And she still probably wouldn't have said anything, but she feels like he's not taking her thoughts seriously. And, you know, she said it. So,
Yeah.
it was, but, it does kind of feel like true to life in the sense that, you know, whenever a tragedy like that happens, there's a tendency to want to blame because you don't want to feel like it's just some cosmic accident of the universe. Somebody was to blame. Somebody did something wrong, and it's natural to have those thoughts.
So at their apartment, Wendy offers Laura some whiskey, which she doesn't take. Um, Heather asks what Laura is looking at, and she describes the pictures that she's looking at. There's a bust of a little child, and Heather says that that's Angus and that he was a gentle child. Wendy says that that was her son, who she lost, but she had two after, and she reckons so can Laura. But Heather says you can't replace the ones you lost. And then they sit at the table, and Heather comforts Laura, saying, "It's all right. It's all right." John is at a bar across the way, but back at the table, they ask Christine if her legs are crossed, which she says they are, and then she uncrosses them. That was weird. Wendy doesn't seem to like that question, but nothing is made of it afterwards. Um, but then the church bell is tolling in the background as John walks down some dark alleyways towards the apartment where where Laura is with the sisters. Back at the apartment, Heather tells Wendy to turn the lights off, and John has made it to the sisters' apartment building, and he rings the bell for service. But no one comes to check on him, so he goes up to the room. Inside with the women, Heather is now standing and like rubbing her breasts and moaning in delight, saying yes, yes, and she's even calling John's name. In the meantime, John is just outside of the door and was going to go peek in, but a neighbor comes out and yells at him, says, "What is he doing?" And so he kind of runs away. But they chase him, thinking he's like a peeping tom, which I love. That whole scenario was hilarious. In the meantime, Heather's having a full on like shivering orgasm, like still groping her breasts, and grabs Laura to kind of like stabilize herself. And I'm like thinking, good for her, you know. But Laura asks what she said, what she meant, but then the scene ends, and then John's back at the bar. So I wanted to ask you, so what the heck do you think is going on here?
So I had no idea. I'm going to be honest. I'm
Mhm.
like, w- w- was it supposed to be? Did did it just sound sexual, but really it was she was just in this kind of other plane of existence, and that's just how it came out, and really she was like hearing from someone on the other side, or was it just a strictly sexual experience and we don't know why that happened? I was confused.
Yeah, I think maybe for example, like Billy in your book gets uh right, quote unquote gets premonitions from God,
Right,
and he gets them in different ways. So maybe people just get different precogs get their visions in different ways, and in this way, this is the way she gets hers. So I think it was both. I think it was definitely a sexual aspect to it, but also she was getting her premonition that way because later on, the scene ends, but we come to find out that they actually warned her about John's safety, and
right.
we'll get to that. So later, Laura meets John at the bar, and they walk home, and John is drunk as fuck. Laura explains that Heather has second sight and that she warned her that John's life is in danger while he stays in Venice. This causes John to have to throw up, and Laura says that they have to leave, and that it was a warning from Christine. John yells that Christine is dead, dead, dead. She does not come back with messages from the grave. And I thought, what a great line and what delivery here, like you felt the full weight of his acting experience coming through here. I was like, wow, that made me sit up a little bit like, yo, that's a great delivery.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of the more memorable scenes. Um, it kind of makes me feel like, he has this ability, and it's almost like, is he protesting too much? Is he talking to himself? Because, she is dead, but her presence is being felt throughout the movie. Even her spiritual self for sure, because these her warnings are accurate. Like, is he trying to convince himself that the things he's seen are not real? Like, why is he so vehement about it? Or is he just strictly like, hey, you're crazy, stop talking about this, I don't want to hear it? Um, I wasn't really sure.
Yeah. I got the same thing. Like, so in the beginning of the movie, when he ran out of the house before he knew anything was wrong, or before he could have known that anything was wrong, like he acted on this premonition that he had. So, and I'm sure this didn't start there. So he's probably had it throughout his life, but he's probably been denying it. And so that's been his default, is to deny things.
Yeah.
And so when something like this comes up, he's automatically going to be denying it.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. Like, this can't be the first time, right? So there's that. And then I think by this point in the movie, they've already told him she thinks you have a gift. Like, she thinks you can do this. So this cannot be some mystery to him, but he keeps protesting and keeps protesting. And I wonder if, yeah, like you said, it's just his default. I've always denied it. I'm going to keep denying it. And if I say it enough times, maybe it'll be true, kind of thing.
Yeah, which sucks because if he had taken it seriously, the movie there would be a
Right?
different
Yeah.
ending possibly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So she says, "You must think I'm ill," and he says, "Yeah," like very quickly. And she says, "If I'm ill, I should see a doctor," and he says, "Yep," very fast. And then this is the first sign of strain on the relationship that I've seen. And she says, "Well, maybe she shouldn't see those women again. That's exactly what you want, right?" And he says, "Yep." And then she says, "Well, maybe she should take her pills again." And John leaps to action, grabs some water, and tells her that they're right over there on the desk. And then she goes to take her pill. And she asks John multiple times if he could take some time off of work. And he says yes, but is very frustrated about it. And he walks out, and we see that Laura didn't actually take her pill. She just cuffed it, which I like. Like, she is her own individual self. And, like, we haven't seen anything other than that throughout this movie. And so, like, it would feel out of place, out of character for her to just take the pill.
Yeah, she never really backs down. I mean, like, she wants to go see those women, so she goes to go see the women, despite his protest or whatever. So yeah, it was very much in character.
And despite this movie being from 1973, right? 1973, their relationship together is pretty progressive. He doesn't like treat her like a typical housewife. Like, he doesn't like want her to stay home and get him have the house ready or anything like that. Like, they have a good relationship. He doesn't like he. This is probably he seems like a gentle man, and he yells at her when he's drunk, which he still shouldn't do. But like I said, this is the first signs of the strain on a relationship. So like I said before, like, I'm really digging the chemistry they have and their relationship. I completely bought into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, they put all their money in these two actors, and it was well worth it.
So at night, they get a phone call from England. It's Anthony Babbage, the headmaster of Little Johnny's school. There's been an accident and he's been hurt, but he's been sent to the hospital. Laura says that she's catching the next plane home and says this is what the warning was about, that they need to leave Venice. She gets the last seat on a charter out of Venice to England, and she reminds him to ask for time off to go back to England. Then off goes Mrs. Baxter, and he's puts her on a one of like this a small boat, which kind of acts like a bus because that's how they handle it in Venice, and then off she goes. So later at the church, the bishop's name is Barbarigo. So Bishop Barbarigo meets with John to discuss the church restoration, which specifically mosaic tiles. As he's climbing a ladder, we see and hear the sisters laughing again. And he gets to the top, and they lower him down on a platform so he can compare the tiles to make sure they match. The platform he's on is very unstable, which you wouldn't catch me on that. Like, it was moving. It was just on some rope, and it was just moving, swaying back and forth. I don't know. Are you getting on that, Celso?
No, I am horrified of heights. So like, it's not a full-blown phobia, but hell no, I would not get on that thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying, to say the least. But as we suspected, a piece of wood comes falling down onto the platform, causing him to almost fall off of it and the platform to spill all of its contents on the floor below and kind of come apart. Which, if that's all it takes for that platform to come apart, it's like, what are we doing here, right? But
It was the
chaos,
70s.
right? Yeah, OSHA. Well, we're not even in America, but OSHA would be having a fucking shitstorm if they saw that. So there's chaos below as everyone scrambles to help, and they're finally able to pull him over to the safe platform. And as I was reading this, I thought it really looked like Donald Sutherland was doing his own stunts. And then I researched it, and he actually did do his own stunts for this.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
hanging on to the rope, and then later on, a set designer or a safety person was talking to Donald Sutherland years after the movie came out, and he's like, "Yo, that rig that you were on was extremely unsafe. That rope was not meant to be holding somebody." And so it could have snapped and you could have been really injured. And Donald Sutherland was like really pissed about that because he thought he was told that he was safe. So,
Wow,
but yeah,
that is
he actually
crazy.
did his own stunts in this one.
Wow. I mean, it looks real as shit, so I mean, I guess it was. Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
So down below, the bishop does not seem pleased. Again, like you said, he's just off this whole movie. And John takes a walk to clear his mind, and Bishop Barbarigo walks with him, and he tells John that his father died in a fall. So John tells the bishop that he was warned by the women about him being in danger. The bishop says he wishes he didn't have to believe in prophecy, but he does have to. And so when he first said this, I thought, oh, because he's religious. Obviously, there's tons of prophecy in the Catholic Church or in the church or the Christian church or whatever. But what we actually learn later on is that no, he's actually a precog, and so that's why he believes in prophecy. Or I mean, it could be both, but specifically in this scenario, he believes in prophecy because he also sees visions like John does, which I thought so it's masterful when you find that out in the end. You know.
Yeah, no, I thought the same thing you did because I mean, why else would they show us that shot of him at the end, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, it's man, you know, I'm just so impressed with the way they put all these pieces together and made them all just fall into place. It just, I mean, like those are the kind of things I think, creators aspire to stuff like that, and to see it so well done, it's just, you know, it's a little awe-inspiring. Um, so they did a fantastic job.
You definitely know why this movie is on all those like lists, why it's ranked so high up there. Some movies you're like, sure, whatever. Like if I were to see Friday the 13th on there, I'm like, yeah, fine. People love it, but it's not particularly a good movie, and it's itself a ripoff of Halloween. But like, Don't Look Now, like you could completely understand why this would be on anybody's list of greatest horror movies.
Yeah, and like I mean, I get how somebody on a surface level could just see it and like, it's kind of slow, nothing too much happens. And we'll get to this, but I mean, for my money, even just the ending is worth the price of admission by itself. But yeah, but much less all this other stuff. But I think some impatient folks might be like, hurry up, when's the good stuff gonna start? Doesn't even feel like a horror movie.
Yeah,
But there's just so many interesting things in it, especially once you kind of see the reveal at the end.
agreed. So as they're walking, they come across a scene of another body being found in the canal, another murder, a young woman. John flashes back to Christine's body being pulled from the water, and I just feel bad for him. Like they're literally in a city surrounded by water, and he has to be reminded every
Hmm.
day that his daughter drowned.
Yeah.
Later, John is back at the hotel packing things up as he takes a water taxi. So apparently, like we said, the hotel's closing for the season, so he has to move to another hotel. While on the boat, he notices another boat going the opposite way, and he sees the two old women, Heather and Wendy, and a third woman, which looks, I mean, it's his wife, Laura, standing on the deck of the boat. And he's completely surprised by this, and he yells, and they're all decked out in black. And he yells after her, but she does not respond. And he runs to the end of the boat and yells again, but again, she does not respond. He's confused as fuck. When the boat docks, he runs off of it and runs back to the hotel. And he finds the concierge and asks if Laura has come back. The concierge is confused because she left this morning. He says she hasn't come back and that the hotel is closed for the season. And it's funny because you could tell, like, he went into the concierge's like personal quarters and like I don't know if he's got a girl up in his room or whatever, but like he's really chuffed to like be interrupted by what he's doing from what he's doing, you know.
That was one of my favorite parts
And
because
I
yeah,
love
he's
that.
just barely dressed and everything. Like that was he's like, we're closed. I mean, that was I love that. Yeah, this was actually one of my favorite parts of the movie. I love these kind of mind bending. This cannot be possible. How could his wife be here? Like, how are they going to explain this? Like, that's just right up my alley. So I really loved it. And and then the score, the music comes on afterwards while he's like trying to chase her and all that.
Yeah,
I really love that part.
yeah, and the score is good too, and it's a typical like late '60s, early '70s string score. With when they ramp it up when it's really getting really suspenseful or something, a big scene is happening, like this sort of thing. So I enjoyed it as well. So then John goes to walk the streets of Venice alone, as there's very little traffic now that a lot of the places are closed for the season. He comes across a plastic baby floating in the canal and pulls it out. It's just then that like he looks around and realizes how little people remain in the streets as the music swells here. Later, He's gone to the cops to have someone drop an image of the woman, Heather, and then he takes a picture of Laura and the drawing of Heather. Well, I'm sorry. With that picture that the police drew up, he goes to speak to a let's say an inspector. I don't know what all the titles are, right?
Hmm.
But the inspector asks him if they had a fight recently, and he says yeah, but it was nothing crazy. He then explains to the inspector how he saw her on the boat when she was supposed to be on a plane to England, and that all he knows, he did check out, and the plane was full, but he doesn't know specifically if his wife went to England. So the policeman asks what he fears has happened, and John says he's concerned about the murderer on the loose. He says that he went to look for the apartment, the older woman's apartment, but he couldn't find it. And so the policeman says thanks for letting him know, and he asks him to try to find the old women's apartment again. And he says he will, and then he informs him he's staying at another hotel. And this inspector doesn't really seem to trust John, and he's kind of like, I don't know, acting weird, just kind of like the bishop did. And I was looking it up, and this inspector didn't speak a lick of English,
Hmm.
and he was just reading it phonetically, so he didn't understand what he was saying, and so that's what kind of makes his character seem off a bit, and which
Hmm.
just leads to the uneasiness of like John's surroundings, everybody that he's interacting with.
Oh, that's a neat touch. Huh.
Yeah. So John walks the lonely streets of Venice again, but we do see a man in a gray overcoat and a scarf following him. Is he a cop or the murderer? We don't know, and the music is very suspenseful here. John is now John now sees Christine in the reflection of the canal, and he also looks up to see that same vision in red from earlier, but then it runs off. He goes down one dead end after the other, but the man still follows him. Finally, John comes across the bar that he was drinking in last night, which is right across the street from the old women's apartment. So he's very happy and he runs to the apartment building. The man ducks into the bar to make a call. John goes in and rings the bell again, asking for the manager. And two, they look like sisters, also come out. The two older women come out. They don't speak Italian. I'm sorry, they don't speak English, and his Italian isn't very good. But he manages to kind of get his point across, and the managers lead him to the old women's room, and it looks like they have up and left. And so as soon as they point out that there's nobody else, that they've left, I should say, that man that was following him comes into the room and introduces himself as a police officer, and he's on the murder squad, which I fucking love that name. And then we then see Wendy saying yes to a new apartment, and that's it. Just a quick flash of that. So John has gone to see the bishop. While there, he makes a phone call to England to Johnny's school. Mrs. Babbage picks up and tells him that Johnny is fine, that he's playing and up and playing already, and that he doesn't even have a concussion. Then she says, I suppose you want to speak to your wife, and hands the phone over to Laura, who says hi. Now, we as an audience, and John as well, are completely kerflummoxed by this, as he was 100% sure that she was still in Venice. What did you think when she picked up the phone? Where were you at now?
Well, I was I was under the impression that he well, honestly, my first thought was there any way for her to get back and forth in that time frame, right? My second thought is, well, are they trying to tell us that he's just losing his mind and that he did not, in fact, see her where he thought he saw her? I also was trying to think, well, is there any way she could be fooling him right now? So I was just trying to work my head around different ways this could actually be happening. I did not think of the actual answer, which we found out at the end. So I was just trying to like fit a square peg in a round hole. Like, how could this be happening? You know?
Yeah. Same. Like I was confused. I was like, well, is there a possibility that the number that he called was actually in Italy and not in England, that sort of thing, And if this was like an 80s movie, like she would have been trying to make him go crazy so that he kills
Right,
himself so she can get some inheritance or something like that,
right,
you know?
right.
So then she says she's catching a late flight back to Venice. And John keeps asking her where she is, and she tells him she's at the school. But he's still very confused, but she tells him she'll be home tonight. So, still confused, he asks again to use the bishop's phone. I don't know who he calls in this instance, and I don't know if like I missed that, but yeah, that happens. Back in England, Laura is wrapping things up in the school, and then John goes to the police station where apparently they have detained Heather. Wendy has gone to the British consulate. Heather says that she wants to leave now. She tells him that the police took them out of their room and questioned them. He apologizes for the confusion and says he will walk her back to the hotel. At the airport, someone picks up Laura, with a sign that says, I forget her name, but it picks her up. And I had a question for you. I guess I'm picturing a flight between United States and Italy, but I guess yeah, Europe. I mean, England is a lot closer to Italy than America is. So seems like it's just like an hour or two long flight. I mean, that's fun. That'd be dope. If I lived in Britain and I could just be in Italy in like 2 hours, I'd probably go for a weekend every a couple of months a year or a couple of times a year.
Yeah, yeah.
That seems real cool. So so back with John and Heather, she explains that it's for her she loves Venice because it's so safe for her to walk because of the halls and the corridors, the echoes and the way the echoes bounce off of them, she can tell, where she needs to walk and where how carefully she needs to walk. And then she tells him that her son Milton loved Venice, but that her sister hates it. Back on the boat with Laura and the person who picked her up, she asks where they're going, and he says that he was told to take her to the police station where John is, and she seems very confused by that. John and Heather arrive at the sisters' hotel. As John walks her up the steps to room 307, he opens the door, and Wendy is already in the room. And she says she went looking for her at the police station. Either way, John tells her that they found Laura, and he apologizes for the mix up. They offer him some whiskey, which he does not accept, but he does take some water. And this scene, to me, it felt staged. Like they wanted to get him there because Heather asks Wendy if she's put out the pictures, and she said yes. So I don't know if she needs the pictures in order to be able to get a vision, sort of thing, or
Hmm.
maybe she just feels more comfortable with the pictures out. I didn't know what they were trying to say there.
I hadn't thought about that. I just assumed because they just moved in, they
Uh-huh.
just like laid out their normal stuff. But I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe you have a point. Maybe she needs all that stuff in order to because she does have one. So maybe.
Yeah. So then with Laura, she's at this police station, and the policemen give her the address of the women's hotel. Off she goes. Back with John, Wendy notices that Heather is wearing different colored socks, and Heather tells Wendy that she's the one who set out the clothes. And she says, "I know, I'm just telling you." And I feel like that's typical sibling shit right there, man. I love it. Those little moments, there's little bit of comedy within the is it levity or brevity? I forget.
Yeah.
So as he's trying to leave, Heather starts having a fit, and Wendy sticks her hand in her mouth to like stop it. I don't think that's what you're supposed to do. That's not safe.
Seems a bit odd.
Yeah. So John makes a quick exit as we hear Heather moaning and screaming through her convulsions. Heather screams for John to come back. She says, "Fetch him back. Don't let him go." And she violently pushes Wendy away, yelling at her to fetch him back. So this is what you're saying. This is how she has her premonitions, her visions. She has like some sort of spasmodic attack or something like that,
Hmm.
and also kind of sexual sort of thing. But by the time Wendy makes it to the bottom of the stairs, he's gone, and she yells his name, but nothing. He's already left. So she does hear the echoes of shoes slapping the pavement, and then Laura comes running around the corner. Wendy grabs her and says, "Come quickly," and brings her to Heather. Heather says that she saw Christine and that Christine warned her to leave Venice, but they didn't listen. She says she told you to leave. She told you. And then she yells at Wendy that she tells Wendy that she must find John. So Laura turns and runs out into the night to look for him. And now this next is just scene after scene. It's just a one long chase to the end of the movie. and it just goes back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah. Were you a little like, I don't know, it seems strange to me that Laura took her back upstairs. Wouldn't you have just said, "Go get your husband"? Like, what was the point of going upstairs?
Yeah, like I guess,
Like, everyone
she,
knew that he was in danger. So instead of wasting time going upstairs, I was just like, why don't you just say, "Go get your husband"? But whatever.
yeah, right. Like if she's in a panic, she would have been like, go, 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 and she would have just followed her. Yeah, that's true, right?
Yeah, because it was like, hey, let's go upstairs so you can hear what we already know, and then you can come back down. But
And
that was
if
just my thought.
like if Laura at first was like, "What are you talking about?" No, then maybe take her upstairs so she could
Right.
see how Heather is responding.
Yeah.
But just as it is, she didn't even try. I agree.
Yeah.
Um, so this whole movie sucks just by based on. No.
He could be
Uh,
alive right now if they had just hurried up. No.
so then John is walking down a corridor and he thinks he sees the reflection of Christine in the water like earlier, but this is an actual person in a red raincoat in the shadows, and he calls after them, but they're across the channel. That's the place where he says, I think I've been here before, or I think I know
Hmm.
this place. I
Hmm.
think that's what that was. And so he goes to cross via a boat, but the figure in red runs off, and then a man in just in the background, thinking that John was trying to steal his boat, runs out and starts yelling at him. I love how John just keeps getting yelled at by Italian men and run off, you know?
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
So they chase John off and he's following the hooded figure. He manages to cross the bridge and continues the chase. We see shots of the red figure reflected in the water, interspersed with shots of Christine from earlier in the movie reflecting in the water. Then the figure runs through some gates and John follows, closing and locking the gates behind him. We hear the echoes of his shoes running, as well as the figure in red and Laura's as well. Deeper and deeper, John goes into the night, searching for the shadowy figure, into the fog. There's so much tension right now in this scene. It's remarkable. We hear the sounds of the night. John walks into the fog, and we get a close-up shot of Heather's blank eyes. Then we see like these cool kind of swills in the fog as the figure continues to run away. What are you feeling so far right now? Like in this scenario, how are you feeling?
Well, just anticipation, because all the mysteries that I think have kind of been presented or about to be resolved. So of course I'm dying to know, like, is he actually seeing this figure? Because him being crazy was kind of on the table, I guess. But and if so, who is this figure? Is this his daughter? Is it her goat? Like, I was just wanting to know the answer to all the things I've been wondering throughout the entire movie. So that's where I was at as this was unplaying. Very edge of your seat,
Right. I mean, this is the payoff, right? This is the
right?
payoff of that slow burn that we've been doing the whole movie, like you were saying. Now we get to finally figure out what's happening. So Laura is still in pursuit as well, but seems to have lost him completely. From one courtyard to another, John pursues until he comes to a dead end. So he doubles back. As he hears the whimpering and this crying, very creepy, he looks up to see the hooded figure at the top of an arch, like behind a window. And he says, "I'm coming." He goes up a set of stairs following the cries. He opens the door and sees the red figure standing with its back to him, hood up, in the corner. And I'm thinking, hello, Blair Witch Project.
I thought the same thing. Um, but I mean, that visual is unbelievable. Like, there aren't that many movies I can remember where my curiosity and tension was at a 10. This was one of those. I just could not fathom what was going to come next.
Yeah, that visual of it, like them in like this, not sewer, but like it's bricks and it's dirty and it's dark and it's wet. And he just opens the door, and that's the first thing we see is like, oof. Like
Isn't that
I've
great?
seen tons of movies, but like I very, very infrequently does like my skin crawl. And
Right.
my skin crawled there. I was like, holy shit.
Yes. Yeah.
And as he approaches, he says, "It's okay, it's okay. I'm a friend. I won't hurt you." In the meantime, Laura and a stranger who's been seeing the chase and who's trying to help get to the gates and yell for someone to open them. That part was weird. It's just this random man. But I think we are trying to, when we first see him, I thought they wanted us to think that Laura was also in danger, right?
Right.
Because the
Right.
the, the serial killer is still on the loose.
Mhm.
And so we get a flash of that slide from early in the movie that showed a picture of the red hooded figure in the church standing in front of the stained glass window. John seems to remember this now, and as he does, the figure turns around, and it's a little person, an old woman with a very wrinkled face. She approaches John, but he says, "Wait, wait." But she shakes her head, smiling monstrously. She reaches for something in her pocket and pulls out a meat cleaver and suddenly chops John in the neck. And we then see images of him carrying Christine out of the pond, like Heather's screaming no, the red and the white striped ball, all while John is also screaming from his attack. And he falls to the ground as blood gushes from his neck as the church bells ringing. I'm not sure why they're going off in the middle of the night. That might just be in his head or something. And again, we see scenes from earlier in the movie, Christine smiling, Laura at the restaurant. So I just want to check in with you here. What did you think when this happened?
So I was a little confused. So I mean, it did occur to me, okay, this is the serial killer, right? I think I was a little like it was so different from what we'd see nowadays because we're seeing an a person we have not seen the entire movie,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty ballsy. To just have some other entity just come in at the end and this is the person. But that image when she turned around and smiled, I mean it's one of my personal top horror images of all time. That was unbelievable. I mean, this may be if I saw it when I was little, I blacked the whole thing out because that was horrifying. I've been thinking about it since. There was also, I mean, there were multiple things going on, but I was also kind of wondering, like, I wonder if they would do this nowadays. If they would make it, was it a dwarf or do we know what?
I just said little person. I think that's the one. I like dwarf or little person. I think those terms are interchangeable.
Because I mean, dwarfism is an actual
Yeah,
thing, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, because I don't know if like there'd be issues with making that person the killer today. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um,
It's certainly sensational to have this as a little person as a killer, but I think the way they go about it, it's not played up for laughs or anything like that. It
hmm
just, in fact, like the killer has the upper hand. You know, they end up obviously killing John. So I think nowadays they would have, or maybe not now, but if this movie were made a decade or two later, like in the 80s or 90s, they would have like yeah definitely played it up for laughs or something or just made it more of a thing. You know.
yeah. I mean, the other thing that kind of I've been thinking about a lot is like they don't. And again, this is interesting because you can think about it yourself, but like they don't go into at all who this person is or why they're doing it. And it's like, wow, that must be a completely interesting story. Why this person is going around Venice killing people. Is it because they were mocked maybe during their life? Are they just inherently, murderous? I don't know, but I like, it's interesting to think about what that person's story is, but they don't, give in to the temptation of having to over explain everything. This is the killer. That is what it is. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, same. I agree. Um, yeah, there's a there's something about the fact that this story about the serial killer runs completely in the background of our primary story, and it's almost to the point where you don't expect it to come back. Like I never expected it to be like, maybe I'm a homer and wasn't really. I mean, I don't write stories, so but like for me, like it was so in the background that if it didn't come back, that'd be fine. They were just using it for atmosphere, but for it to
Right.
come back in this way was just, I think, just masterfully done. And you know, you don't expect this little because it's a small figure, right? So you don't expect that to be a threat, really, And when it turns out to be a threat, I was just like blown away. I loved it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like what you're expecting versus what you get. Because, they did a good job. They kept showing his daughter's face. So I think it's that kind of dichotomy between what you see and what you get, or what you thought you were going to see and what you get. And
Right,
they keep showing his daughter's face. So when it turns around, you might be expecting this youthful child, and what you get is this, you know, scary image. And like you said, it was masterfully done. I was definitely shocked, and I mean, at this point, it takes a lot to shock me, and
mm,
to make my skin crawl, and to make me, immediately. Of course, I was rethinking everything as he was laying there, and all the images were going through his head, and like, oh, he was seeing the future on the boat. Oh, okay. Like, so there was a lot of you know, thoughts crammed into that minute or two, in a way that, they're very, I think, few movies that have done that for me.
right. And what this scene also reminded me of, have you seen Alice, Sweet Alice?
I've not.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't say anything more, but I do have a section at the end of the podcast where I make some suggestions, so I'll definitely keep that one in mind.
Hmm.
So back to the movie. Also, the bishop has suddenly woken up, and again, we're not sure why. And then interspersed with this are like scenes of them making love last night, as John bleeds out on the floor. I thought so, like, oh, man, life and death. It was great, but also devastating. Um, them holding hands, the killer shaking her head at him, and John is in the throes of death. He starts convulsing, which makes his leg kick out a glass window. And then we see the scene from earlier in the film where Johnny rolled over that piece of glass and fucked up his
Mm,
tire.
yeah.
So it's a very violent death for John. And we see various scenes from the movie as the his blood leaks down the window. The scene fades, and then we see a magnificent looking black boat, their version of a hearse, filled with flowers as the music wrenches up beautiful strings, beautiful soundtrack here, beautiful score, I should say. Then we see Laura and the sisters on the deck of the boat. It's the vision that John had earlier where he saw Laura. He did have the gift after all, but unfortunately it was too late for him. The hearse goes down the river on the foggy winter day in Venice. We see Laura looking out over the water. An absolutely amazing shot as they arrive at the church, and the bishop is there to greet them. Wendy taking her sister's arm to guide her into the church as the credits roll. We see the funeral procession into the church as the birds fly about in the background. The movie ends on a still shot of the church where Laura lit the candles for Christine earlier, the one John said he hated. I think that's the church in which they had his funeral at.
So I guess, is that why the candle blew out? That was him, his life, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. Fuck. So then that's the movie. That's the end of the film, and I just thought the details in this movie are fucking spectacular. Like, this is not a movie that you can watch while you're scrolling your phone. You need to put the phone down to pay attention to it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, so that's Don't Look Now, and I guess we never know why they called it Don't Look Now, unless you have a.
Yeah,
Do
I
you
think
have an
no,
inkling?
I think that happened in the scene where they first meet the two women in the restaurant, because I think he says something like, "Don't look now, but we're being stared at," or something like that.
Oh, okay,
I
okay,
believe.
okay.
I believe, if I remember
Yeah,
that right.
yeah, I
But
think so too. Now I might have just went over my head.
yeah, like you said about the details, like, one thing I'm thinking about now, um, I mean, who really knows with these things, but you were talking about how shocked you were when his wife said, "You're the one let him play by the water." In the end scene, he seems so desperate to help what he thinks is a little girl. And did they have the wife tell him that to kind of help us understand more why he's so desperate to help this person, to kind of like not make up for what he did, but to like get it right this time, kind of thing?
Hmm.
Um, I thought that was pretty interesting. The other thing, like as far as like the premonitions, and that's my jam. I love all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of, when I saw it and I was thinking about it, I kind of liked the idea of like he inadvertently caused his own demise. So when he saw the premonition of his wife on the boat, that set that set off a chain of events that led to his death. Whereas had he not seen that premonition, maybe he wouldn't have gone to look for his wife and then gone to the police station and gone to the old lady's apartment and then all of that. It seemed like that particular premonition he saw almost caused the chain of events that ended up dying. Or maybe he was just always fated to die and nothing he would have done would have changed it. I don't know. Those things I kind of find always fascinating.
Yeah, that's true. Like, was it like you said? Was it a vision, and he could have stopped, or was it just fated to happen, and that's what he was just seeing it as it happened. You know,
Yeah, did you ever see Lost?
I did not know.
Okay, you need to watch Lost, Miguel, because
But
I
please
mean,
go ahead. I mean,
there's a very similar situation. I don't want to say too much, but it's another scenario where by trying to like prevent something from happening, you actually cause it, kind of thing. I mean, in
mm,
this case, because he doesn't understand his own gift, had he understood it better, maybe none of this would have happened. But to our earlier point, he kept fighting against it, like she's dead and all this stuff. He never really listened to his wife that these things could actually be happening. These warnings were real. He's all annoyed because he might have to leave Venice for a week or something. So I mean, I guess in some ways he was the architect of his own destruction.
that's messed up. That
Yeah.
is messed up.
But I'm glad, man. I'm glad we did this, and I'm glad
Yeah.
I finally saw it. It's definitely a movie I'm gonna like be thinking about for sure.
So I guess like at the end, yeah, I typically ask like, so what did you think of it? Did you? It sounds like you liked it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, like I said, the thing I want most from a movie is to remember it, and hopefully remember some interesting images, some thought provoking kind of things that happened. Um, to admire the way they did certain things, and like
Mm,
all those three things are here, like kind of when I mean, as someone who tries to construct stories myself, I look at this and I'm like, oh my god, how did they do this? So like I'm gonna give it some thought and just kind of try to deconstruct how they did it, because sometimes that's helpful for me, like to see how this master did it, while I'm flailing around, trying to like do 10% of what someone like this can do. But um, it was great to see, and I kind of want to see this other guy's movies now, because if this is what he's able to produce, I mean, it's great to see what a master can do.
right.
But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Um, the imagery is something from the very beginning of him coming out with that body in the water to the very last image of her turning around to him laying there, and all those scenes flashing through his head. It's a lot to digest, and I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah, same. I mean, we do have to give credit to the writer of the short story, Daphne du Maurier. She wrote The Birds. She wrote Rebecca. A lot of her movies, short stories and books have been um, uh,
Adapted.
adapted to movies. Uh, Alfred Hitchcock did, obviously The Birds and others of her movies, of her short stories, I should say. So a lot of it came from that short story, and then it was adapted for screenplay by Chris Bryant, and then wonderfully directed by Nicholas Regg. So I agree with you. I'm so happy to give this movie a second chance. When I first saw it, I was over a decade ago, so I was in my 20s still. I don't think I was just giving it the time of day, and I'm so happy I saw this one. It's an amazing movie. Top 20 movies now, maybe even top 10. What we typically do here is we will rate the movie from 5 upside down crosses. So, how many upside down crosses would you give Don't Look Now?
Okay, so let's do, only because, right? Like I don't know like if the perfect like movie exists, or I have to, or there's very few. Let's say, can we do like 4.5 upside down crosses?
Yeah, you can do point five. So, and it just depends on how you're feeling that day. You can watch a movie today and it's 3 stars, and tomorrow it's four. So it really just depends. But just right now, you're feeling it at 4.5.
I'm feeling 4.5. Like for a 5, I probably have to feel like this might be the best thing I've ever seen, kind of
Okay.
thing. Like I'm a tough rater, so this is a great score for me.
Okay. So I guess now I'm curious. Do you have any 5-star movies?
Well, I mean, to your point, like I think it's just affected by my formative years. Okay.
Mhm.
So like for me, Aliens is like a 5-star movie, but I've seen that movie a cajillion times. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And just I watched it at just the right time in my youth where I just like, oh my God, this is like the best thing I've ever seen. I actually snuck into Northwest Theater in San Antonio to see this movie, and I almost walked out. I was so scared.
Okay.
Like I was so horrified. But there's that one. I mean, there's other ones that aren't horror that again,
Mhm.
that from my youth, like Back to the Future is always something we always still talk about, stuff like that.
Okay.
But like in my older years, yeah, it's hard to find. Maybe I'm a bit jaded at this point. Like newish movies I've seen that are like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think I'm gonna have to agree with you. I think I absolutely love like the direction, the acting, the cinematography. Like Venice, even though it's not the prettier sides of it, it's more grittier side. It's still shot beautifully. Um, I am not one for traveling to Europe. I've never been one to be like, hey, I really want to go to Europe, but this makes me want to go to Italy. Along with whenever I see any giallo type movie, I'm like, damn, I want to really want to go to Italy because they just make it look so beautiful. Um, so all that and the fact that this movie is from 1973, it's over 50 years old, and it still resonates today. Like it's still a story that like makes you, like you were saying, puts you on the seat of your on the edge of your seat. Um, I mean, it's just masterful storytelling, and I think I would give it 4.5 upside down crosses. The only thing is I don't mind slow burns, but in fact, I love slow burns. But there's some things that came up in the movie that were like, well, that didn't really make sense, and it didn't come back. And whereas like 90% of the little seeds that they sprinkled throughout the movie came back, other things didn't come back, and those things kind of weirded me out a little bit. But today, like for example, the her having or what looked like an orgasm while she was having a vision, like that seemed weird, and it wasn't really explained. And I don't need it explained to me, but when you don't explain it, it does affect my score a little bit.
Are you saying we didn't have to see the maid come out of the bathroom, Miguel? Is that what you're hinting?
Yeah, we didn't we didn't have to sniff her. We didn't have to see her put her magazine down. Like we all know that we read in the bathroom. But yeah, but it's not in any negative way. It's just um, there's I think I'm more free with my perfect movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, perfect movie for me. If I were to put TCM against this one, I think TCM is a better movie. Completely different movies. I'm rambling. 4.5 upside down crosses for Don't Look Now. If you haven't seen this and you've listened already, first of all, God bless you. Second of all, definitely go watch this movie. It's a recommend in the highest order. I'm so glad that Celso chose it for this episode. All right, so what we typically do now is, in order to be fully absolved of your horror movie sin, I will be suggesting 3 movies for you to watch for your penance. If you'd like to watch those in order to be fully absolved, I completely understand. Otherwise, you'll probably burn in the fiery pits of hell. That's not on me. That's on you. That's your fault. So the first one I would say is in the same era as Don't Look Now, and it's Deep Red from 1975, and it actually takes place in Italy as well. And it is a giallo film, which I absolutely love giallo, and it's directed by Dario Argento. We actually did an episode on it in the first season here. Great, absolutely great film. Um, the second one is Alice, Sweet Alice, same from 1976. This one stars, well, I guess Brooke Shields is in it. It's one of her first films, The Little Girl. This one is great as well, and it does take place in the 70s. It's around the Catholic Church and some deaths and all that. So I think you really enjoy that one. I just saw that one for the first time last year. And then the last one is a bit newer, still over like almost 20 years old, and it's A Tale of Two Sisters, which is a South Korean psychological horror film.
Hmm.
I think you're really going to like that one as well. So I would recommend those 3 movies to you: Deep Red, Alice, Sweet Alice, and A Tale of Two Sisters.
Well, I don't want to burn in the pits of hell, be tortured endlessly, Miguel. So I'll watch these movies because I do want to be absolved of my dastardly ways.
Okay. And hopefully you watch those movies and you can come back in the future and we can talk about those or some other movie.
Yeah, yeah, no, that sounds good. That sounds good to me.
I had a blast. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Once again, if you can please let my listeners know where they can reach you, how they can support you in any way.
Sure. My book, The Ghost Tracks, is out now. You can find it pretty much anywhere. And I am on social media, mainly on Twitter, under I think it's just at Celso Hurtado. So feel free to reach out. And that's pretty much about it. Hopefully, I should have a follow up to the Ghost Tracks out in the near future.
Awesome. Well, if you'd like to follow me, you can follow me on, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at MHC Pod. You can follow me on Instagram at My Horror Confessional. If you'd like to email the show, you can email me at myhorrorconfessional@gmail.com. We do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/myhorrorconfessional. For the first 6 months, we've been donating all of the pledges to women's organizations that are fighting the fight to grant women access to healthcare, supporting them when they need to make decisions that not everybody wants to make. We have donated in the past to Bridget's Alliance, which allows women, helps women to get access to abortions via buying plane tickets to states where abortion is allowed, or child health care if they need to do that. We've also donated to Planned Parenthood, and I'm going to be making this month's donation within the next couple of days here. So if that's something you'd like to support, please reach out to us on patreon.com/my horror confessional. The music was done by Taylor Swift. You can follow her on Instagram at the Taylor Fox. The art was done by my friend Cap Mikey. You can follow him on Instagram at Captain_Mikey_art. And that was it. Thank you everybody for listening, and we will talk to you next week.